Hey everybody, what's up? This is Kev here, and this is a topic that I am already nervous in talking about. I have to be honest, I have to admit, because I am not a woman, I can already kind of tell that I may have my own biases, and there may be some stuff that I'm very ignorant about. When trying to discuss this topic about women's rights and combine that with Agenda 2030 for the US, and how when we talk about the identity politics and the gender politics regarding womanhood, this is probably going to be something that is very touchy, and yet this is something that really has to be discussed because it is so complex and because it plays such a very vital role in where we are now in our current politics and with the election that's here for between Trump and Harris. And so we have to start talking about it. I think we have to start at least building conversations about it. And if there's anything that I'm missing out on, if there's anything that I may be not quite understanding or maybe not do great justice to, please, by all means, this is what the comment section is for, whether you are here on the live or whether you are watching the replay of this conversation is very important, and I'm going to do this in the best way that I can to try not to be biased. I am not a misogynist in any way, or at least not intended to be, but this is something that we have to discuss because we got to get into how this plays a role in not only just Agenda 2030, which in many regards that is a very good thing, but how the identity of woman has been so broadly defined, in fact, almost non-defined, and how fluid it has become to encompass people who want to be women. We got to start talking about it from the standpoint of how this affects the rights of women and girls, particularly those who are biologically women, biologically female. All right. So with that said, let's go into getting the likes up. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're new here and click the notification bell so that way you are alerted every single time that there is a new video. All right. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to jump into a very, I won't say controversial, but there is some controversy regarding this particular video. As you all may remember, Ketanji Brown, the Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown, was in front of a group of Republicans, and they were asking her, to define what a woman is. And so we're going to actually take our time to listen through that introduction because it's actually a good starting point for how we are in this position right now of defining the lack of definition of the rigid definition of what a woman is. And, we'll get further and further along in that particular discussion. So here we go. Let's move this back a bit.
Let's move on. I want to go to when you were at Harvard, your thesis entitled "The Hand of Oppression: Plea Bargaining Processes." In that piece, you argued that judges have, and I'm quoting, I brought this up yesterday, personal hidden agendas that influence how they decide cases. So what personal hidden agendas do you harbor, or do you think other judges harbor?
Thank you, Senator. That line, to the extent it appears in my thesis, was written by someone who had not gone to law school and was senior in college, who had spent a summer at an internship working in making observations in the context of a criminal justice internship. It is not a view that I hold.
What led you to that belief?
I'm thinking back, it's been 30 years, but the summer before my senior year, I interned at a public defender's office in New York. And I was part of a team of, there was lawyers and interns interns on this team, and they were handling misdemeanor cases. And
So it was from an internship experience.
yes, before I became a lawyer.
All right, let's go to something else. Senator Cruz was discussing with you, and I think this is important. It's something that parents all across the country are worried about, and that is the progressive indoctrination of their children and the pushing of critical race theory in the schools. And you told Senator Cruz that as a board member of the Georgetown Day School, you didn't have any control over what was taught at the school, no control over curriculum, and you weren't aware that the school was pushing CRT. But I would think that there would have been parents that came to you and said, have you seen these books? Are you aware that this is being taught, being on that school board?
No, Senator.
No one ever mentioned it.
Georgetown Day School is a private school. It's
Right.
not. It's not a public school.
I'm fully aware. And you mentioned that you said that you meant you thought he meant that critical race theory isn't being taught in public schools.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. But we know that's not the case. We know that CRT is being pushed in our K through 12 schools. And I've got a letter here, Mr. Chairman, that Senator Tuberville and I wrote last year to the National Education Association on this issue. I'd like to submit that to the record because it's relevant to our discussion.
Without objection.
And we had admonished the NEA for adopting pro-CRT materials during their annual organizing meeting and proposing to spend $127,000 in teachers' dues to combat opponents of CRT. And there are countless reports of CRT being pushed in the public school system. And a lot of parents that I work with every day, every week, don't have the funds to send their child to a private school. They're relying on the school systems, the public school systems, and it is important to them to have a Supreme Court that is going to protect parental rights to teach these children as parents see fit to have their children taught. And I will tell you too, with Georgetown Day School, I found it astounding that it teaches kindergartners, 5-year-old children, and I've got grandchildren. And they teach them that they can choose their gender. So is this what you were praising when you applauded the and I'm quoting you, transformative power of Georgetown Day School's progressive education? Do you agree that our schools should teach children that they can choose their gender?
Senator, I'm not remembering exactly what quote you're referencing, but Georgetown Day School is
It was in a book,
And
you gave the quote.
Georgetown Day School is a private school.
Yeah.
That
I'm asking, do you agree that schools should teach children that they can choose their gender?
Senator, I'm not making comments about
All right.
what schools can teach.
Let me ask you this then. United States versus Virginia, the Supreme Court struck down VMI's male-only admission policy. Writing for the majority, Justice Ginsburg stated, supposed inherent differences are no longer accepted as a ground for race or national origin classifications. Physical differences between men and women, however, are enduring. The two sexes are not fungible. A community made up exclusively of one sex is different from a community composed of both. Do you agree with Justice Ginsburg that there are physical differences between men and women that are enduring?
Senator, respectfully, I am not familiar with that particular quote or case,
Okay.
so it's hard for me to
Okay.
comment as to whether.
All right. I'd love to get your opinion on that, and you can submit that. Do you interpret Justice Ginsburg's meaning of men and women as male and female?
Again, because I don't know the case, I don't know how I interpret it. I need to read the whole
Okay.
thing.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No,
Yeah,
I can't.
you can.
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So
I'm
you
not a
believe the meaning
biologist.
of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Senator, in my work as a judge, what I do is I address disputes. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the
All right.
law and I decide. So I'm not.
The fact that you can't give me a straight answer about something as fundamental as what a woman is underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive education that we are hearing about. Just last week, an entire generation of young girls watched as our taxpayer-funded institutions permitted a biological man to compete and beat a biological woman in the NCAA swimming championships. What message do you think this sends to girls who aspire to compete and win in sports at the highest levels?
Senator, I'm not sure what message that sends. If you're asking me about the legal issues related to it, those are topics that are being hotly discussed, as you say, and could come to the court. So I'm
And I think it tells our girls that their voices don't matter. I think it tells them that they're second-class citizens, and parents want to have a Supreme Court justice who is committed to preserving parental autonomy and protecting our nation's children. So let's move on. I want to go to the.
All right, so there you have that. So you guys remember that particular day when she Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown was being grilled about gender identity and what exactly a woman is. Now, I had to do some digging, and I had to come to find out how fluid the idea of being a woman really is. Now, granted, it may seem as if I should already know what that is, especially as we have, cisgendered and transgender titles that are being given to men and women and those who are born at birth and what they're assigned and all that type of stuff, right? However, I had no idea the fluidity that people were assigning to the idea of gender. And this is why we're going to be going into the topic of the SDG. I closed the wrong tab. We're going to go into the topic of the sustainable goals for number 5, sustainable development goals number 5. And there is a particular video. I've done this channel before, but I also feel like it was very important to listen to again. Let me see if I can find her. This is it, hippie in a suit. So I'm going to move into this one right here.
I usually start these videos off by going right into the first target, but I wanted to pause and take a quick moment to address the notion of gender because I have received a number of questions about this. Now, this is not my particular area of expertise, but I did want to provide a little bit of background based on my understanding and research. You'll notice that SDG 5 specifically refers to women and girls and not to females, except when it comes to the topic of genital mutilation. Why is that? Well, being a male or a female is a biological determination, meaning it refers to the chromosomes and sexual organs that one is born with. Whereas being a woman is a gender determination, which is much more fluid, complex, and subjective. The way SDG 5 is written is for all gender equality, and for the most part includes anyone identifying as a woman or girl, regardless of the biological sex they were born with. However, an important caveat from what I have read is that in practice, most or many programs working on gender equality are not intersectional or inclusive to all women, for example, trans women. So when I speak about women and girls, I am being inclusive with the use of the term, but I think it is important to recognize that that might not always be the case in practice. And this is why we have the Leave No One Behind principle in the 2030 agenda, which aims to put the most vulnerable first, and it's so crucial that we do that. So now that that's clear, let's move into the targets.
All right, so there you have it. And we're going to go on because I do want to have some background on the idea of the SDG 5, because this is talking about women's rights and things like that. But we're also going to get into more of this topic of the gender fluidity. And gender fluid is not just simply something that a person can just claim at any time. This is actually a sense of politics, if you will, in regard to what you assign yourself to be and what you claim to be and all this type of stuff. All right, so we're going to go into this particular topic of the SDG 5, women and girls' rights, and then we're going to go into something else regarding to specifically in the United States. So here we go.
Target 5.1, end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. Discrimination is defined as the unjust or prejudicial treatment of a certain category of people. This target looks at whether or not legal frameworks are in place to promote, enforce, and monitor equality and non-discrimination on the basis of sex. Specifically, it looks at legal frameworks that address 4 major dimensions: public life, which includes the ability to vote, hold public office, and have equal rights as a citizen. Second, violence against women, which looks at if there are laws that punish violent acts against women and if they are enforced. Third, employment and economic benefit, such as the ability to be hired, receive equal pay, and parental leave. And finally, marriage and family, such as a minimum age for marriage, and that generally women do have the same rights as men in relationships. According to the most recent SDG report done by UN Statistics, discriminatory laws and legal gaps continue to prevent women from enjoying their full human rights, based on data collected in 95 countries across these 4 areas of law in 2020. In the area of overarching legal frameworks and public life, more than half of countries with data lacked quotas for women in national parliaments, and close to 1/5 maintained some sort of discriminatory nationality laws. In the area of violence against women, 83% of countries included budgetary commitments to implement legislation addressing violence against women, but 63% lacked rape laws based on the principle of consent. In the area of employment and economic benefits, over 90% of countries mandated non-discrimination on the basis of gender in employment, but almost half of them continue to restrict women from working in certain jobs or industries. In the area of marriage and family, almost 1/4 of countries failed to grant women equal rights with men to enter into marriage and initiate divorce, and 3/4 of countries did not stipulate the age of 18 as a minimum age for marriage for women and men, with no exceptions. Target 5.2, eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls in public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. This target focuses on eliminating physical, sexual, or psychological violence against women both within their intimate partner relationships and by people other than their intimate partners. Physical violence consists of acts aimed at physically hurting a victim. Sexual violence is defined as any sort of harmful or unwanted sexual behavior that is imposed on someone, whether it be by use of physical force or intimidation or coercion. And psychological violence consists of any act that induces fear or emotional distress. It includes range of behaviors that encompass acts of emotional abuse, such as being frequently humiliated in public or intimidated, as well as many controlling behaviors. This target is measured by two indicators: the proportion of women and girls aged 15 or older subject to violence in the last 12 months. One that looks specifically at their partners in intimate relationships, and the other that looks at any other aggressor. Nearly 1 in 3 women, or 736 million women, have been subjected to physical and/or sexual violence at least once since the age of 15, the majority of which was perpetrated by a current or former intimate partner. In fact, more than 640 million women have been subjected to intimate partner violence, which is about 26% of all women aged 15 and older. If we look at violence by other aggressors, evidence has shown that globally, an estimated 7% of women have been sexually assaulted by someone other than a partner at some point. However, the true prevalence of non-partner sexual violence is likely to be much higher, considering that there's particular stigma related to reporting these kinds of violence. We do tend to see differences depending on the region. There are consistently higher rates of violence in low and lower middle income regions compared with high income regions. These variations are likely due to the challenges that women face in leaving abusive relationships, such as insufficient economic resources, limited availability and access to formal support services, weak social support networks, and fear of repercussions associated with social stigma. 137 women are killed by someone close to them every single day. It is estimated that of the 87,000 women who were intentionally killed in 2017, more than 1/3, or 30,000, were killed by their current or former intimate partner. Women.
And so I'm not going to get into all of everything. Oh, back a bit. So basically, you see right here, the goal of SDG 5, gender equality and stuff like that, is ending the discrimination with all girls and women and girls, eliminating violence against women, eliminate early and forced marriages and forced FGM, recognize and value unpaid care work, ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities, universal access to sexual reproductive health, and women's rights to economic resources, technology, enforcement, and policies and legislation. All that is SDG 5. All right. So as we continue on, I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of something that was very important, that when it comes to the idea of womanhood and being female, they don't necessarily intersect. So you can have a woman whether or not she has been born physically female. Now, with that in mind, I want us to go into something very important that we're going to be discussing. That is, let's see.
Title IX. And it is surprising and kind of uncomfortable to hear that so many college students know so little about the historic civil rights laws. So as we begin our year-long celebration of this breaking federal law at We Need to Talk and CBS Sports, we had our friend and lawyer Amy Trask break down this.
Little girls on the playground, when you see girls and women participating in sports, competing in sports, pursuing dreams, goals in sports, know that they do so with protections afforded by Title IX. Protections which didn't exist until 1972, which was when Title IX of the Education Amendment was enacted by Congress and signed into law by President Nixon. 9 provides that if a school receives federal financial assistance, it may not discriminate on the basis of sex. If any department or program in a school receives that assistance, Title IX applies to all of that school's programs and activities. In other words, if a biology department receives a grant from the National Institute of Health, the athletic department must also comply with Title IX. While Title IX isn't limited to sports, that's the context in which it is most often referenced and discussed. As to sports, Title IX applies to recruitment, admissions, housing, counseling, financial assistance, and more. There has been a significant increase in the number of young girls playing sports since Title IX was enacted, and while Title IX may not be the only reason for this, it is certainly an important reason. And those girls you see on the playground, they may go on to compete at the collegiate level, they may ultimately become Olympians. So a strong relation between girls and women who participate in sports and who achieve high levels of success in their careers. It is believed that this is because participation in sports is empowering and can change perceptions and attitudes about women in leadership and decision-making roles. Title IX and the protections it provides can inspire girls and women to pursue their dreams in sports and otherwise.
Well done, Amy Trask. I thought that was so just the way it explains Title IX. And look, when we were young, we're the babies of Title IX. I don't think when I was young and my athletic playing career and quickly after high school, but when I was a track and field athlete, I used to switch with the boys in the shot put circle. They would go, I would go. So I never felt there was a separation. But looking back now, and Amy mentioned this, and how high school athletes, even if you don't go on to continue your athletic career, in your career further on, I look back. So when I was in college and I was the manager of the women's soccer team and I was the PA analysis of my career and why I'm sitting here today. And it was because of Title IX that the University of Maryland had those full teams, several of them going on to national championships. So now I could send it to you guys. We have great college athletes and an Olympic champion, which Amy mentioned as well, and the impact Title IX's had on your lives.
Well, first of all, it's very embarrassing that these people don't know what Title IX is. I mean, I'm cringing as I was watching that. But all of us are too young to have been affected by not having Title IX.
Before.
Yeah, before. And, when I was in high school and I was thinking about what college I want to swim in, they didn't even have women swimming or competing in any sports in the NCAAs. The women had their own association. It was called the AIAW, which stands for Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. And a couple of days ago, I was talking to one of our directors, Suzanne Smith, about this. And she had sent me a picture of a postcard from a women's march she went to back in March of 2017. And it said, "We have been training our whole lives for this moment. Game on. Sincerely, the daughters of Title IX."
Yeah.
We all daughters of Title IX. My daughter, and she plays lacrosse, and a lot of her teammates have won Division I scholarships because of Title IX. That didn't happen back when I was in high school. So a lot of things have changed, and I really want to thank the people like the Donna De Veronas, the Billie Jean Kings, who really fought for us to have equality in sports.
Yeah, that's so important. There's so many layers to it, because I think when you look at Title IX, you think often about college, you think about high school, but I think about even the younger girls that are affected by this. And myself, when I was in middle school, I was playing baseball before softball, because there was only baseball teams until a certain age.
Softball team.
When I was playing basketball, I played on the boys team until there was a girls team in 7th grade. And for myself, I looked at other classmates that maybe some of those girls didn't have the skill set or the talent or the comfort in playing on a boys or trying out for the boys team. And so prior to Title IX, 1 in 27 girls were participating in sports. Now there's 1 in 3 between the ages of 6 and 12. So 12 years old, that puts you right at about the 7th grade age. And so I can watch my nieces, I can watch younger girls that are participating so early, and it's not even crossed their mind not to have an opportunity, the same opportunity as so many young boys that we often see.
And I think also in that 1 in 27 number, obviously not everybody's going to go on to be an Olympian or a professional athlete, but that those qualities, those characteristics that you build through playing sports, they're invaluable later on in life, Tina, as you mentioned, just even professionally, that confidence, that perseverance, that diligence. And when I was speaking with my mom recently about this, it's not that far removed. Like, as you mentioned, being a generation removed, they didn't even have the same opportunities in gym class. They would have what was it, square dancing instead of organized sports and gym class. And I take that for granted all my life. And PE, we did a variety of sports. That's how I got involved in sports at 5 years old and onward. So just to be a generation removed is still, jolting in that there's still progress to be made. And you can look even just to last year with last year's women's basketball tournament and how, now, thanks to pressure, thanks to Sedona Prince highlighting that there were these inequalities last year, that they're going to have, that they're going to have, the branding, the promotion that they should have had all along. But it's still, a long road ahead. And I'm grateful for the progress, but we can't, take our foot off the gas here.
Sign in, please. Patsy T. Mink, right?
That's my mother. First woman of color to be elected to Congress.
Do you have a title other than Mrs.? Yes. Do you spend a lot of time in this country, in the United States? Yes.
Her most significant accomplishment is Title IX, which forever transformed athletics in America. And it almost didn't happen because of me. It was sort of a chartreusey mustard color, if I recall correctly. A Ford Pinto. We got in the car to go see Woody Allen's movie, Love and Death. I think it was a Wednesday. The future of equality in some large way was on the table that day. When the personal and the political collided. Are you ready to go there? The story has a great ending in Washington, D.C., on Capitol Hill, but begins in the Hawaiian Islands at the turn of the 20th century. By the time my great-grandparents arrived, Hawaii was a territory, so it was part of the United States. His name was Gojiro, born in Japan. Recruited to work for a sugarcane company on the island of Oahu, essentially indentured. Couldn't stand the working conditions, so he jumped his contract. He was the first of a long family tradition of taking a stand against injustice the only way he knew how. As my great-grandparents, you don't know what your children might produce in the next generation, or the generation after that. December 6th, 1927. They named her Patsy Matsu Takemoto. My mother. School teachers would say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" She would say, "I want to be a doctor." She was laughed at. That's not something girls aspired to or did. She was thinking, I want to be able to do what the doctor does, and didn't really see any reason why there should be obstacles in her path. My mother was an American citizen by birth, being born into a U.S. territory. By the 1940s, with World War II, the open discrimination of Japanese Americans, second-class citizens who needed to be surveilled and restricted, that was really, really upsetting for her. We ended up at the University of Nebraska. She got there and she wanted to live in a regular dorm. She couldn't. She was told she should go to the International House and apply for a room there because she wasn't white. Something needed to be done, so begins to mobilize an anti-racism campaign, make speeches, published letters to the editor in the school newspaper. A College of Medicine polluted with germs of a discriminating nature. I found that the dormitories were not open for people like myself. I found that affiliation with sororities and fraternities was impossible for anyone with skin any darker than the superciliously arrogant whites. Patsy Takemoto, age 19. She didn't get into any medical school. Not one. She said in some cases was explicitly told she was denied because she was a woman. She was profoundly disappointed. She wanted to change the whole system. She thought, why don't you try law school? You are an advocate. She was one of 2 women in her law school class. That's my mother. She meets my father a couple years into law school. John Francis Mink. My father was at the University of Chicago as a graduate student in geology and geophysics. Their eyes met. They knew they were made for each other. He would blast opera. They got married in January of 1951. Patsy Takemoto Mink. And in March of 1952, she had 1 kid. Which was me, Wendy. After law school, nobody would hire her.
She might make you a darn good employee. What's wrong with her? She's a woman, isn't she?
She said, I'm going to have to find a different path. If a law firm had been willing to hire her in Chicago, she wouldn't have gone back to Hawaii. If I can't get hired, I'm going to run for office. There was just no stopping her. Now, at this point, Hawaii was a territory. So in 1956, she ran for the Territorial House of Representatives. She won.
Representative Patsy Takemoto Mink.
I think the time has come for the American people and for the Congress of the United States to search its conscience. Recall back to 1898, the promise they gave to the people of Hawaii upon annexation, that when we were ready, we would become a state.
I don't think that the people there know enough about the problem to cast an intelligent vote or make intelligent decisions.
It's no longer a question of pleading for statehood, to my mind. It's a question of rising up in indignation. I feel that the people here are ready and want statehood.
Hawaii's voters, faced with the first opportunity to participate in the nation's government, responded with a record ballot cast by 93% of those eligible.
When statehood was declared, this was her chance to go to Washington. She decided to run for Congress. It had been a nasty race. An expected reaction of people who were used to certain social norms. Politically, men had all of the power. It was entrenched. Men made them laws. A whole social system was against her. They would come up to me at rallies and, when was the last time your mother baked cookies for you? If you need to go to a party tomorrow, does your mother have time to take you to go get a dress? She was somehow an inadequate mother.
Election time in the 50th state. Democrat Daniel Inouye, Japanese-American war hero, will represent the new state in Congress to influence the course of Hawaii's development for years to come. The campaigning is
She was devastated, sitting at the breakfast table. Where do we go from here? The Democratic National Convention in 1960, my mother was asked to give one of the speeches in defense of civil rights.
And down there on the floor, addressing the convention in support of the Platform Committee recommendation on civil rights, is Mrs. Patsy Takimoto Mink.
Once she started speaking, people listened.
I urge you to support the platform and to give this nation one of the greatest weapons of peace, the winning of the respect and admiration of the entire world. Thank you very much.
That was a pretty big deal, and as a woman of color, an even bigger deal. That was certainly a gift that helped her attract electoral attention. And in 1964, she ran for Congress a second time in every election. The big contest was the primary contest. Two guys of reasonably high stature in the party were running, as was my mother. I didn't want to see my mother devastated. For me, for every election, there was this incredible anxiety. Worrywart. Sometimes she also called me Pumpkin. So I was either Pumpkin or Worrywart. I was Worrywart that night. I was so anxious that they left me at home election night. My father, the numbers guy, kept reading the printouts of various precincts. Every time he read one, he'd call me. My grandmother, her expectations of my mother were to maintain a mighty, clean household. She didn't expect my mother to go on and get a law degree or enter politics or become the first woman of color to be elected to Congress. Yeah. We all moved to Washington.
Whenever anybody as beautiful as Mrs. Mink gets a picture in the paper, I remember.
It's wonderful to have you here. It's wonderful to have such a, as Bennett says, beautiful representative of the state of Hawaii. It's a beautiful state, and it deserves you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for being our guest.
Immediately, she got to work.
We do have a national responsibility to speak for the women in the country. And so I have assumed that role. No matter how excluded they have been in the past, the individual does count, and we can make an impact.
Her most significant accomplishment is Title IX, which prohibits discrimination against students on the basis of sex. It's not actually new language, it's borrowed language from the Civil Rights Act, which didn't cover gender equality in education. It's the Education Act amendments of 1972. I don't think anybody knew the full effect of those 37 words. Richard Nixon signed the bill into law shortly after the burglars broke into the Watergate. But this story wasn't over. Within months of it becoming law, they became fully aware that there were pretty big implications, specifically for athletics, which led to the enraged awakening of the male athletics lobby. Men who didn't want to share money and men who didn't want women in their sport.
Does equal opportunity mean equal funding?
You're concerned about funding women's athletic programs, is that correct?
You think women will ever play collegiate football?
Not at Oklahoma. We are very concerned to the point we feel that it possibly might threaten the program. The women's sports certainly will be non-revenue producing, and naturally I do not feel like total budget should be split equally.
That didn't age well. John Tower was a senator from Texas, and Robert Casey was a representative from Texas, both of whom took on the defense of male athletics. Representative Robert Casey wanted to exempt physical education from coverage under Title IX. The Casey Amendment If Casey won, there were enormous consequences. Physical education would become the first domino. She wasn't going to let it happen. It was my mother and her allies in Congress waging the fight with legions of feminists lobbying. Casey Amendment is debated. My mother makes an impassioned speech against the Casey Amendment. It was a battle down to the wire. This was the definitive moment for athletics equity. The future of equality in some large way was on the table that day. The vote gets underway. Meanwhile, I got in the car. An oncoming car crashed into us. Phone call comes to her on the phone. Your daughter's unconscious in intensive care. I got the brunt of impact. The ultimate family versus career moment. That my mother was even in the hospital with me, given the stakes of what was happening in Washington, D.C., seems sort of insane to me. The Casey Amendment wins 212 to 211. It lost by 1 vote. My mom's vote. Yes. The windshield flew at me. All the glass fell. It cut my face. Here. Yeah. It's all along here, side of my mouth. I'm sure the male athletics lobby were celebrating on the night of the 16th, but things were happening. Her colleagues in Congress, especially Congresswoman Abzug of New York, who was a good friend, fought in her absence. Many expressed concern for what was going to happen to me. Even a substantial number of pro-Casey people. It was the speaker's decision, Speaker Carl Albert of Oklahoma. He always said, Patsy and I see eye to eye, because they were both short. I mean, he was a short man. Given my mother's abrupt departure, thought about it, considered it, and decided, revote. Many on the other side came around. So in the end, 215 to 178 in favor of deleting the Casey Amendment from the Education Appropriations Bill. My mom won, girls and women won, feminists won. Yes. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. That is called Title IX.
But it was very very difficult getting into school and getting into the professions. I couldn't find a job. And when all of my contemporaries at home say, oh my goodness, what you've done to politics at home, and, you know, wish we had never heard of Patsy Mink, I'll say, well, it's because of all of your attitudes that drove me into politics. If you'd given me a job when I came home from law school, I would have been very happy.
I am the child of someone who made a huge difference for women and girls in education. She taught me change might be slow, but changes can happen. I did screw it up with the Pinto, right? For 2 days.
All right, so that is pretty much it. This is how we ended up getting Title IX into the books, into law. This was done on the basis of making sure that women and girls had the rights that were necessary to have federal funding for sports and education as well. So now that we see the sacrifice that had been made by the person who helped to start it and managed to create the bill, you see it has also been inspired by the Civil Rights Act. Patsy Tatsumoto Mink was the one who created it. And there was a specific reason of making sure that it would be with women and girls. At that time, it was associated with being female. It was specifically for females, right? So now with that in mind, we got to get into the expansion of it. So let's go into the explain and how it has expanded to include multiple people. Make sure that you are able to subscribe if you haven't been subscribed to before, and make sure that you are able to follow up with everything that's going on here. There is the one from CNN that I wanted to play, and this is right here. The Title IX goes beyond gender in sports. In just a moment. And let's actually not do that quite yet. Title IX.
The Biden administration is facing a flurry of lawsuits to block its changes to Title IX from taking place. The revisions announced earlier this month add national correspondent Kayla Gaskins.
The implementation of Title IX more than 50 years ago helped level the playing field for female athletes. President Biden in those protections.
Strengthening Title IX and promoting gender equality is a top priority for my administration. Every person deserves a chance to realize their full potential.
On April 19th, the administration announcing expansions, voting rights for LGBTQ students. The announcement was met with a windfall of legal action filed by GOP-led states and conservative organizations against the Department of Education. We spoke with Michelle Exner from Parents Defending Education, one of the groups filing the lawsuits.
I want this lawsuit to be a voice, right, for the millions of female athletes out there who feel ignored and abandoned by the president and the White House and this administration.
Critics worry the changes will force young girls scholarships from biological women.
Women and girls shouldn't have to stand for it. It's 2024.
The new Title IX protections will challenge transgender athlete bans in places like West Virginia, where a group of middle school girls are now banned from competing after protesting against a transgender athlete. The state's attorney general now asking the Supreme Court to weigh in. A spokesperson for the Department of Regulations following a rigorous process to give complete effect to the Title IX statutory guarantee that no person experiences sex discrimination in federally funded education. A YouGov poll from earlier this year found 59% of Americans do not support allowing transgender athletes to compete on teams that match their gender identity rather than their gender at birth. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting.
Governor Greg Gianforte issued a statement after the state Supreme Court upheld a district court ruling that a Montana law prohibiting transgender women and girls from participating in women's sports is unconstitutional. He says this decision degrades and humiliates female athletes. Montana is committed to fairness in women's sports and will continue to defend women from unfair competition.
The Biden administration put out new Title IX rules today that will increase protections for LGBTQ plus sexual assault. These moves reverse several changes made by the Trump administration. Among them, sex discrimination, orientation, and gender identity. They fundamentally changed the way schools conduct assault investigations, removing the Trump-era requirements. The new rules sidestep the controversial issue of transgender athletes, saying that that was still under review. For more on these changes, I am joined by the Washington Post's Laura Meckler, who has been following all of this closely. Laura, thank you so much for being here. So these rules go into effect starting in August. On this issue of LGBTQ plus students, it now says that it is illegal, very specifically, to discriminate against those students. That was not the case before?
Well, actually, the Biden administration has long held that it was the case before. They say that Title IX, which bars discrimination on the basis of sex, has always also included sexual orientation and gender identity as part of that. And that is a way essentially to and that's how they've been adjudicating cases. But what this regulation does is essentially gives that more heft by putting it into a formal regulation that has gone through the full rulemaking process that says this is the official federal government's interpretation of what Title IX says.
And so on this issue of changing the rules with regards to how investigations are handled about sexual assault, explain to me what the situation was and now what these new rules do.
So, you know, the question of sexual assault and sexual harassment on campus has been a huge one for, for many years now. Well over a decade has this been a hot topic. And in fact, the Obama administration tried to address this with its own set of guidelines. And then the Trump administration came, tossed out the Obama rules and wrote their own type procedure where there would be a separate investigator who would be different from the person who made the judgment, and you would have sort of a cross-examination opportunity and a hearing, and it was a very higher burden of proof for what exactly would be considered sexual discrimination or sexual harassment under the law. So they had this system that was different in a couple ways. It was both sort of a more formal court-like system, and it was also a higher bar for proving your case. And so now what this Biden administration rule does is essentially revises that system with one of its own and makes tweaks in both of those, sort of gives schools more flexibility. They don't have to use these hearings. They don't have to have cross-examination if they don't want to, as a good example. And it also has a broader definition of what sexual harassment actually is under the law. So it would be easier to prove your case.
Help me understand what the Biden administration is trying to solve there. What was the concern with the previous regime?
Well, there were a number of concerns. From the point of view of sexual assault survivors, they were concerned that if you mandate a cross-examination type situation, that it would be essentially re-traumatizing for them. Of course, people on the other side would say that this is how you get at the truth, but that's what they said. The other issue is that colleges themselves did not like being put into the position where they were essentially becoming a de facto court. That they said, that's not what we do, that's not our job, we don't feel comfortable with it. So that was another problem. And then in terms of the burden of proof and how do you want those sort of scales of justice to hang? Are you going to make it a little bit easier for people who are alleging these incidents happen, these cases of harassment? Or do you want to make it a little bit harder to prove your case? And the Biden rules come down on making it a little bit easier to prove your case.
There has been, as you know, a good deal of pushback on this. Congresswoman Virginia Fox, who heads the House Education Committee, conservative, has said that some of these rules are basically redefining sex and gender in America. What is the argument that they're making there?
Well, this is an argument that conservatives are making all over the country and, in fact, legislating based on that. They essentially do not accept the idea that you can change your gender, that you can be born a boy and then decide you're a girl, is how they would put it. Of course, other people would say that no, there are people who internally really feel like they are, in fact, the other gender, and that acknowledging that and accommodating that is the right thing to do. But if from a conservative point of view, and there's, like I said, legislation dealing with this all over the place in conservative states, what they're really trying to say is that, this is a threat to essentially other girls and women. They don't want somebody who was born a boy showing up in the girls' locker room, for instance. So they take great issue. And I got a lot of response today from conservatives saying essentially that the administration was going too far and taking what they view as a radical position on gender.
Lastly, as I mentioned, this does not address this very controversial issue of transgender athletes. Why did the administration say that they pushed off that decision?
Well, what they officially say is that regulation, a separate regulation that addresses sports, is not ready yet. But what people tell me who are familiar with the administration's thinking is that really it's the politics and that they don't want to be talking about this question of trans women competing on girls and women's sports teams in the middle of an election year.
All right, Laura Meckler of the Washington Post, thank you so much for being here.
Can't even see past that. Okay, there we go. So it has said in the past, only 84 women represented the U.S. in the Olympics prior to Title IX, and then by the time Title IX came into existence, by 2021, there were 329 women that were able to be a part of the Olympics. That's a huge, huge jump. All right. But let's not lose focus. We're going to go into our next portion about, again, how much Title IX has changed. I'm going to see if I can find it. Go through everything that we discussed from the inception of Title IX to where we are today, or at least up to 2 years ago.
Title IX is this 1970s law about women's and girls' access to sport, but it is about so much more. It is about sexual violence. It's about transgender rights. It's a piece of legislation that affects children, parents, professors, coaches, and it has transformed the world that we live in today. Title IX is a federal law meant to prevent gender and sex-based discrimination in entities that receive federal assistance. The first chapter of Title IX's implementation is really associated with access and equality in sports. Catherine Switzer, this female runner who's told you can't run the marathon, she actually signs up under her initials a few years earlier and runs the Boston Marathon.
The world's most famous foot race even attracts a leggy lady, Kay Switzer of Syracuse, who did.
But there are lots of stories like that. And what's really interesting is that as women like Switzer are pushing back on these assumptions that girls and women can't or shouldn't be physically active, they are succeeding. But Title IX almost immediately faces resistance. So you see during the 1980s that there are movements to kind of constrain the reach of Title IX. For example, there's one case, a Christian college called Grove City College, and Grove City College pushes back on the directive that they have to comply with Title IX regulations. They say, we don't actually have to comply because the only federal aid is these direct grants to students, which happen through this one office. But ultimately, it is decided that that doesn't stand, and that once federal money flows into an institution, it might go to a scholarship or a grant, but it flows throughout the institution and has impact. And so thus they are kind of beholden to Title IX.
Today, I'm directing every agency and executive department of our government to strengthen their enforcement of Title IX within the next 90 days.
In the 1990s, you start to have both kind of more rules regulating how Title IX is imposed, but there's also something new afoot, which is that Title IX starts to be used much more expansively around issues of sexual harassment and what comes to be known as sexual violence on campus. And so you see the expansion of this legislation to be applied where there might be harassment, either by teachers or by peers, that creates an unfair discriminatory environment. So if you think that early on, Title IX and sex-based discrimination is basically thought of as girls not getting an equal shot, by the time of the Obama administration, it's being expanded to say, hey, sexual orientation counts under this rubric. Hey, gender identity counts under this rubric. So they are both expanding the definition of what constitutes sex-based discrimination and continuing the fight for equality in sports. One of the signature moves of the Trump administration is actually to roll back Title IX protections, to remove transgender people. And then the second one is a series of decisions to make reporting of sexual violence more difficult.
There is no way to avoid the devastating reality of campus sexual misconduct. Lives have been lost. Lives of victims and lives of the accused.
So today, the most intense battles over how Title IX should fairly be carried out are absolutely about transgender rights. Today, we're talking about sports teams again. And now one of the most kind of hot button issues is about what is fair in terms of gender equality and inclusion of transgender athletes. The most high profile case is about Leah Thomas, a transgender woman swimmer at the University of Pennsylvania. Immediately was a lot of blowback about this being a kind of unfair advantage because Thomas retained, critics say, much of the advantage of her originally male physique. It's really been an issue which is kind of testing what the purpose and the limits and the proper implementation of Title IX is. So I think it's important to realize that for every step forward that Title IX has made in terms of safeguarding gender equality, there has been pushback and there has been backlash. And depending on the historical moment, some of that backlash has been more successful than others. We know from the history of Title IX that there can be real change, real institutional transformation can happen.
So I'm going to highlight a particular problem that I am really noticing. So that I've taken the time to notice, when it comes to the start of something and how it just starts to expand, right? So you have a bill, or you have some type of act that's supposed to be done, that is made for a specific person or done with a specific use, to try to create equality and try to create fairness, so that way people can be able to compete fairly or to participate fairly. And then over time, especially if it's a law that gets like a lot of pushback from people, what ends up happening is that they will bring in the law, they will allow it to be passed, and then over time, they will find ways to expand it so that way that they will have a reason to dilute the actual effectiveness of what this particular act is supposed to mean. Now, as Black people, we are aware of how that is done through, particularly when it comes to civil rights and stuff like that. However, this is also true when it comes to women's rights as well, and women and girls, I should say. This is what we're starting. This is what we're seeing with Title IX, including the diluting of what it means to be a woman, and the diluting of the whole idea of sex and sexual orientation, and how that plays a role in a person being able to craft their identity within society. So something that is of good intention and well intentioned ends up being diluted to try to bring in everybody else to try to make it fair for them. But then what happens to the people who that is originally for? It causes a lot of not only blowback, but there are some negative effects that occur, particularly for people who have already been benefiting from a particular societal norm, a particular societal dominant trait or something like that, right? This right here is no different. So that stated, we are going to go into a couple of one of these. So both of these come from Talk TV. So let's see how this comes from. This is really long. I thought I wanted to do both of them, but I don't think I'll be able to do it. It's way too long. Let's try this one right here.
Well, Washington is a city of kings. It's true the head of our education department is confirmed by the Senate, but whether that person chooses to use their powers wisely, those powers are vast beyond belief thanks to their grip in the education department over the country's purse strings. Now, in every corner of this country, communities are debating the proper social and legal response to the rising popularity of transgender ideology. Yesterday, Biden's education department overruled many of their past and potential future decisions, not with legislation, but with a regulation, and a terrible one at that. We've talked about it here many times. Just about exactly a year ago, as Catherine Lehman was being confirmed to a top post at the education department, I did a radar predicting this is where we would find ourselves if she were to be confirmed. Then we talked about it again in April, in another radar, when it was abundantly obvious where all of this was headed. Questioning then the Republican Party's disinterest in pressuring Biden to stop this plan. And it's probably worth remembering at this point, too, that Republican Richard Nixon was the person who originally signed Title IX into law all the way back in the 1970s. Now, the Obama administration's Dear Colleague letters on Title IX interpretation had three particular flaws. They used an overly expansive definition of sexual harassment, they used an overly expansive definition of sex, and they curtailed due process rights for students accused of sexual harassment and assault. Betsy DeVos walked much of that back during the Trump administration, and even to the approval of more sober observers on the left, the Washington Post editorial board, I think even. The new rule proposed by Biden arguably goes even further than Obama by threatening speech rights, defining misuse of gender pronouns as sexual harassment. Now, many conservatives actually used to decry Title IX as a bureaucratic mess that created more problems than it solved. Now they defend the policy against the left's attacks on sexual equality. But there's probably a good debate to be had about whether Title IX ever really advanced sexual equality in the aggregate anyway, giving bureaucrats vast, easy, almost immediate power that should belong to legislators. So what did these regulatory tweaks do under Obama? They intentionally stripped due process rights from students accused of sexual assault, putting more men and women through horrifically painful kangaroo courts that condemned innocent people and added to the pain of victims. They confused the definition of harassment and assault, then they thrust schools into culture wars and compliance nightmares by suddenly declaring that, quote, on the basis of sex, the famous wording from Title IX, also meant on the basis of gender identity, tying federal money those schools depended on to meeting controversial new standards based on controversial research and psychiatry. This is where it's made all the more ridiculous. In a call with reporters on the new rules, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona announced the department would be releasing a separate guidance on gender identity and athletics. So if gender identity is the equivalent of sex, as Cardona's rules insist, then there is zero need for separate guidance. But if gender identity is not the equivalent of sex, then it has absolutely no place being added to on the basis of sex in Title IX, which was intended specifically to protect women on the unique biological basis of their sex. It's literally in the law. The left despised few Trump administration officials like Betsy DeVos, but when she revised the Obama-era guidelines that Biden has now brought back, they had to begrudgingly hand it to her. When the Obama guidelines fell apart, even his cheerleaders and media had to begrudgingly criticize him. The Biden administration has absolutely no moral or political incentive to bring back these disastrous rules. We've run the experiment. We know the results. The only people who were happy with those results were far left activists in Washington, D.C. and Title IX coordinators whose salaries have increased tuition costs and made campuses babysitting bureaucratic hellscapes. Now, how did our firefighters and media cover this announcement this week from the Biden administration? Well, they put the Biden administration's talking points straight into their headlines, as you can see right here. Now, this is how the activist class is dragging down the Democratic Party and the media. That, of course, is not to say Republicans don't have their own problems with that, but nearly every major institution, from corporations to the media to Hollywood, is under the thumb of cultural radicals on the left who have purged all dissent to the point where their ideas have just become unchecked nonsense. And in a country with vast federal bureaucracy based here in Washington, D.C., where administrators have incredible power at their fingertips, that unchecked nonsense becomes even more dangerous. So here's wishing Title IX a very happy 50th birthday. Ryan, I want to ask about that question of political incentives. I honestly cannot explain or understand what the Biden administration is doing here. There was widespread agreement, even on the left, that the Obama-era guidelines were bad, that they caused problems, that they infringed on due process rights, and the Biden administration is bringing them back. The only reason I can think of is to placate the sort of activist wing in Washington, D.C. And I think some of that activist wing is probably in the education department and does sincerely believe in this. What's your read on that? What incentive is there for Biden to do this?
I mean, it certainly isn't what people are calling popularism, where you look at polls and say, where do you stand on a particular issue? Because like you said, the DeVos rules, bizarrely, because it was DeVos, were actually pretty popular, and that there had not been sufficient protections for survivors of sexual assault and sexual abuse in the past. People genuinely felt that there was an overcorrection, and that not allowing due process, not allowing some elements of due process to students in colleges was unfair. And so it kind of came back to a middle ground, and it was one of those, evolutions of policy that, both sides, we're mostly like, none of this is perfect, but we've gotten to a better place as a result of this back and forth. Of course, like you said, the hardcore active base within that never felt that way. Maybe the rest of the folks just kind of moved on and weren't around, and so you had a kind of proportionality question that if you have a small group of people who are extremely passionate about a particular issue, and everybody else has, kind of disagrees, but it's not a priority for them. And also on the surface level, they agree with it. Everybody's against sexual assault. Everybody's for equality. And so if you can kind of then, move your policy through that rhetoric, you're not going to confront a whole lot of opposition, a lot of concentrated opposition.
No, I think that's a really good explanation. I remember you said that once before, and it made a lot of sense to me that if this is your top issue and you're that passionate and you're going to push for it, and it sounds, at least in spirit, like it's in the right direction. Yeah. The only other question I'll toss your way, Ryan, it's a busy news day, is about the Dear Colleague process, because this is basically just re-enshrining what was done through a Dear Colleague letter. And DeVos sort of tried to walk it back. But to me, it's just kind of crazy that because of federal funding, the Department of Education is able to have this level of regulatory power. Maybe you disagree with that. I would be curious to hear. I think it's, when we're trying to go through the democratic process in all these communities around the country, whether it's on how we adjudicate sexual assaults or how we run sports teams, to have that sort of overridden by regulations from the Department of Education, to me, it seems anti-democratic, but I'm curious what you think.
I mean, I think there is a very important role for the administrative state to play, but I think if it gets into territory outside of what people find is reasonable, then you're going to have enemies of the administrative state use those as examples to gut the entire thing. And so I think that you have to, there has to be some, responsibility with how that power is wielded.
That's a really good point.
All right. So with that said, that took some time. Wanted to get this one right here. Oh, it says I'm offline. Try this again. I may have to find it. Hold on. Okay, so I'm gonna have to try to find it through the other method. I was hoping I wouldn't have to go back, but I'm gonna have to go back. Give me just a moment. In the meantime, if you're liking what you're seeing, make sure to give this a like. Let's see.
So
just because all this stuff about like this beautiful solidarity where we share our experience and
Illusion that prison's a nice place, but
well, no, but I mean you're just conjuring this scene, which is not.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Talk TV's brand new female-only show. Each week we'll be bringing you frank and honest debate around some of the most pressing issues, all from a female perspective.
This one. This one here.
A giant poster quoting a wall in Liverpool. The poster read, "Woman, women, noun, adult, human, female." But according to one LGBTQ activist, it qualified as hate speech and was deemed dangerous for transgender women. I'm joined now from Newcastle by Dr. Adrian Harrop, who campaigned for the poster's removal. And in our central London studio, we can speak to Kelly J. Keane-Minshall, founder of the women's rights organisation Standing for Women, who were behind the poster. Hello to you both. Dr. Adrian Harrop, to you first. What is so offensive about the dictionary definition of women?
There is nothing inherently offensive with the dictionary definition of women. That really isn't what this was about at all. This is about what that particular poster presented in that particular way, in that particular location represents, and what the underlying meaning and the thinking that was surviving.
Then, to anyone looking at it, was it any more than a dictionary definition?
So that poster was put up by a campaign group that is led by Miss Keane Minshall, who has led and spearheaded a campaign against trans people, particularly against trans women, that's extended over several months now, mostly online, but also in a real life environment, where she sought to demonise trans women and to highlight them as dangerous sexual predators. This poster that was put up is a symbol of that campaign. It is that campaign made flesh, as it were. And for transgender people who are living and working in Liverpool, it is a reminder to them that they are under such immense public scrutiny for every single aspect of their identity, their behaviour, their body shape, their appearance. And that campaign is led by this woman, Miss Keane Minshall, aka Posey Parker. And that's the reason why it should have been taken down.
Let's get a response then from Kelly J. Keane Minshall. This was part of a targeted transphobic campaign by you and your organisation.
Well, firstly, I'd like to remind Mr. Harrop that I'm married. Highlight the absurdity that in 2018, saying woman equals adult human female is an offensive thing to say. And Mr. Harrop delightfully has proven that point by having a tantrum and contacting every CEO or every executive on the board of PrimeSite until it got removed.
But this wasn't a one-off, though. This wasn't just a poster that you put up with the definition of woman on it. And we should say you're wearing that definition on the T-shirt that you're wearing today, Kelly J, as well. What Mr. Harrop is saying, that this was part of a long-running campaign by you and your organisation, and as such, it was offensive.
How is the definition of woman offensive?
Adrian Harrop.
What a ludicrous thing to say.
Adrian Harrop, your response.
It really isn't about the definition itself, though, is it, Posey? It's not about that. It's about the fact that you have specifically and explicitly...
Keane Minshall, Adrian Harrop.
Mrs. Keane Minshall, I apologise, and it's Dr. Harrop, thank you. You have explicitly excluded trans women from your definition of women.
Absolutely. Of course I exclude trans women for the definition of woman, adult human female.
That is not something that is appropriate.
Would you like to explain to us, as a doctor, what a woman is? Mr. Harrop?
A woman is a person who identifies as a woman.
Is that what you do when somebody comes into A&E? You ask their identity before you treat them?
Absolutely not, Mrs. Keane Minshall, and you are fully aware of that.
It's not about identity, is it?
I do not identify.
What you're seeking to do, what you and your misogynistic allies seek to do, is erase what it means to be a woman in law and in life. And that is why this campaign has been absolutely essential. If you didn't push women to the point that we are very, very angry, that we feel we have to protect the language around us by using words like cervix havers, menstruators, cervical cancer, obliterating the word woman, not even using it in campaign material, we wouldn't feel the need to assert the fact that the meaning of woman is only, the definition is only adult human female. So I think the ball is very much in your court.
What do you have, Kelly J. Keane Minshall, against trans women?
I don't. I just don't think they're women.
So I will counter that point, Mrs. Keane Minshall, by stating that you have led a directly transphobic campaign that has extended over several months.
I haven't led as much of a transphobic campaign as you have a misogynist one. You attack, intimidate and harass women on Twitter all the time.
Over a period of months, Mrs. Keane Minshall, and you cannot deny that. You have had a hand in this. You have highlighted.
How many women? You have threatened to report to their employers. How many, are you under guidance at the moment because you call women disgusting misogynist names on Twitter?
That's not true at all, Mrs. Keane Minshall, and you know
should be.
Well,
You threaten. You told a woman on Twitter she didn't delete.
Can I ask, speaking of Twitter, Kelly J. Keane Minshall, about your own Twitter account, which has currently been suspended, both your Posey Parker account and your Human Female account. You yourself were questioned by police, West Yorkshire Police, after accusations that you made towards Susie Green, the mother of a 16-year-old, took a child to Thailand.
Would you like to elaborate on that accusation? It was because I said I thought it was wrong to castrate a 16-year-old child.
I'm asking whether by using the language that you're using, castration, you were being deliberately provocative.
No, I'm being deliberately truthful in an age where it doesn't seem feasible that people can just speak the truth. Well, the truth is, most women are comfortable with calling trans women women and giving up our rights to men.
Let's talk about truth and freedom of speech. Adrian Harrop, can I talk about truth and freedom of speech? Why did you want to see this poster censored? If you didn't agree with it, could you not have put up your own alongside it?
I absolutely respect the fact that Mrs. Keane Minshall does have a right to free speech. What Mrs. Keane Minshall does not have a right to do is to make transgender people in Liverpool feel unsafe and unwelcome in their own community.
With the definition of woman.
Yes, with
if
your
you can't see the
campaign,
absurdity in what you're saying, then I don't know if anybody can help you. It cannot be such that the definition of woman, the dictionary definition of woman, is offensive. Do you know how offensive that is to women?
No one is objecting. Mrs. Keane Minshall, no one is objecting to the dictionary definition. No one is wanting to alter.
Yes, you are. That's exactly what you did.
However, the fact that this term has been appropriated overtly transphobic campaign makes transgender people feel unsafe and unwelcome in their own
A dictionary definition on a billboard makes men feel unsafe.
It is the symbolism behind the poster.
Symbolism is black and white, plain English truth. That is the symbolism. The symbolism is that we knew when we put the billboard up that chaps like yourself would think that they could control what we think and what we say. We know this, and that's why we did it. It's absolutely time that women are allowed to talk about ourselves, our spaces, our rights, and our legal rights without men like you telling us that we are not allowed to speak.
Okay, I'm going to have to wrap it up there. Kelly J. Keane Minshall, Dr. Adrian Harrop, thank you both very much indeed.
A woman who is likely the world's best-known children's author is defending Libya, who sparked outrage last weekend with a series of. She's now written an essay on her blog addressing her own experience with domestic violence. That's why she's been pushed to advocate for women's rights, she says. Let's bring in Renee Filippone, who's in London to follow the story. As I mentioned, this is a growing controversy, Renee. We joined this story already in progress, if you will, but more and more voices critical of J.K. Rowling.
Her movies, people, calling for her publishers and the movie companies that produced her movies to do something about it. And it all starts back and goes back to last weekend. And that's when J.K. Rowling responded on Twitter to a headline she read online that read, "Creating a more equal post-COVID-19 world for people who menstruate." And she responded by saying, "I'm sure there is a word for these people," followed by a number of deliberately misspelled versions of the word woman. Now, there was instant backlash to that. She was accused of being transphobic. So she wanted to further clarify herself and sent out another tweet over the weekend. That one said, quote, "I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth." Now, again, as you mentioned, an essay. She's trying to explain herself further, a lengthy essay, saying her position in part comes from being a victim of both domestic and sexual abuse. And what she says is, in mentioning these things now is not in an attempt to garner sympathy, but out of solidarity with the huge numbers of women who have histories like mine, who've been slurred as bigots for having concerns about single-sex spaces. Now, when she talks about single-sex spaces, she's talking about bathrooms and change rooms. She pointed in her essay to concerns she has about a proposal in Scotland that would allow trans people to change their sex on their birth certificates to what they identify with. And she has said, you know, if you throw the doors open of bathrooms to any man who feels like he's a woman, then you open the doors to any and all men who wish to come inside.
Some of the voices who've been critical include the stars of her own movie, including the biggest star, Daniel Radcliffe.
That's right. Harry Potter himself responded, posting a blog post, an essay on a site called the Trevor Project website. And that's a nonprofit agency that supports LGBTQ youth. And in that statement, he wrote, transgender women are women. Any statement to the contrary erases the identity and dignity of transgender people and goes against all advice given by professional healthcare associations who have far more expertise on this matter than either Joe or I. He also added that he hopes her comments don't tarnish the experience that fans have had with her books and the movies. And we've also heard from GLAAD, the LGBTQ rights group, who are calling her tweets cruel and inaccurate, saying that she continues to align herself with an ideology which willfully distorts facts about gender identity and people who are trans. In 2020, there is no excuse for targeting trans people. And Heather, it's important to note here as well that this isn't the first time she's been called transphobic. Late last year, she came out in support of a researcher who was fired for saying that transgender people can't change their biological sex. So this is definitely not the first time she's in hot water. She is very outspoken on Twitter and is getting a lot of backlash that continues to grow.
Okay, we'll check back in with you on the story as it continues to grow as well. Thank you, Renee Filippone, in London today.
Let's see. There's still more. In fact, I may end up actually, let's see. Let's go into it.
You ever feel like you need to subscribe to some of the ideologies that the Young Turks, like the organization as a whole, subscribes to? You don't feel like that
I
at all?
mean, there's been pressure. Not, by the way, let me just be clear about this.
Let's move out of this.
In terms of
That's
TYT's
kind of taking too long.
The Young Turks co-host Anna Kasparian doubled down on her position that women should not be referred to as birthing persons or persons with uteruses. The progressive media host laughed at critics last month, calling transgender inclusive language degrading to women. Kasparian responded to Olay saying, laughing out loud, the meltdowns over wanting to be referred to as a woman rather than a birthing person is pretty wild. Never apologize for that, especially as a biological woman who has had a effing lifetime of being told I'm less than.
Other progressive journalists and transgender activists are accusing Kasparian of inappropriate timing. Maybe a transgender drag queen running for Congress in 2024 found Kasparian's views troubling, tweeting, "I really don't understand why you're still tweeting about this. How many times a day are you being referred to as birthing person in real life, knowing the intense scrutiny and hate trans people are facing right now, along with the hundreds of anti-trans bills couldn't you just not?"
It's like 75% of the way into when this story actually started. What happened was,
lay it out for us.
Yeah. Okay. So Ole was like tweeting or live streaming or something about the story we covered last week with the two basketball players who both engaged in a kind of, on the court antics that was very polarizing at
My
the time.
favorite story.
Right.
My so much interest I have in it.
So Ole was defending one of the girls who people on social media were saying looked like that character from Ice Age, the one with the wide set eyes.
What?
So this is why it's so convoluted and silly. So Ole was basically saying, don't make fun of this girl's looks. And she was doing a stream about that and that some people are haters and haters need to leave this girl alone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Stop drinking the Haterade.
In the swoops in and replies, oh, haters like you? And Ole responds, question mark, like, what are you talking about? I'm not talking about you. This has nothing to do with you, right? Then Anna Kasparian replies with a video of Ole from like a week before on another podcast of hers, having a conversation about the whole Anna Kasparian trans statement back when it happened, saying that she didn't agree with Anna Kasparian statements, and basically that she felt like some members of the left community were having kid gloves as they criticized Anna Kasparian because she's a woman within the left community, that white women get special treatment and sensitivity, and making that kind of argument against Anna Kasparian. So Ole's like, wait a minute. You've been sitting on that and thinking about this for a week. I'm not even talking about the trans stuff right now. I'm just talking about this bombing with a video of Anna Kasparian for why inclusive language like birthing persons has its place and that people have an opportunity to use it. Pointing out that Anna Kasparian herself has had a really hardcore shift on this particular issue and now seems to not understand why people use that language. Of course, Anna Kasparian has the right to be called whatever she wants to be called. If she doesn't want to be referred to as a birthing person, it's not clear to me who exactly is referring to her as a birthing person, but I think others are more than happy to continue to refer to her as a woman, as we all have been doing this whole time.
Maybe she had an experience where that came up, and that's why she doesn't like it. And she was neutral before, but now
she has yet to point to that experience.
How demeaning and
after weeks and weeks of talking about it, she has yet to point to that experience. So again, like I don't know. This is one of those things where it's like, why is this an issue? It seems to be an issue because Anna Kasparian keeps bringing it up, even in moments where literally nobody was talking about her and nobody was talking about this. She seems to really still have this chip on her shoulder, or some people have argued that it generates a lot of clicks and attention to, characterize yourself as a victim of language in this way. So that being said, what do you make of it all?
I mean, it's definitely not healthy to be holding on to clips, like having like a little storage folder where you got attacked by Olayemi. I can't imagine, my folder would be overflowing by now.
This is a folder on our desktop that says L's.
So that's not, everybody's got to step away from this thing we do every now and then.
Yeah.
You just got to let it roll off you.
Yeah.
If you take it too personally or you stay mad at people, it's not healthy. I think, we were talking about this before the show started today. Like, I think social media, I'm against the view that social media is just this very bad thing and it's very bad for everyone. I think that's like a moral panic. I think there are a lot of ways it improves a lot of people's lives, gives you access to information, entertainment, puts you in conversation with. Some people are too online. Some people's mental health is clearly impacted by living on this space.
Not ours. We're very healthy.
Not ours,
of
course.
We can quit whenever we want. We're doing it right.
We're so mentally healthy. It's unbelievable. But some people would benefit from stepping away more, just like not paying attention to what haters or anyone is saying. But now our entire business model sometimes is like reacting to what other people are saying. We do a lot of reacting to it. Viewers like reaction. So that's part of the model of doing this, but you kind of have to have a thick skin. Although I agree with what Anna Kasparian is saying about these terms and the clinical.
She is allowed to be called a woman. In fact,
ugly nature.
Maybe the best response, maybe people should just take to the internet and under all of her posts say, just affirm her, woman, 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 just like woman her into complacency. I want to make it really clear, in case anybody was thinking about referring to Anna Kasparian as anything other than a woman. Well, that is inappropriate. She has made her preferences very clear, and gosh darn it.
But you're kind of, I mean, but this is kind of interesting because you're sort of making fun of the idea of someone demanding being referred to a certain way, which is the entire conservative criticism of pronouns and everything.
Contrary, I sincerely am begging everyone to use Anna Kasparian's preferred identification. I want nothing more than for Anna Kasparian to only ever hear herself referred to as a woman for the rest of her life, unless she changes her identification, which is her right to do.
We should all, be. It's good to be polite to. I don't know. I'm making these really mundane observations. Be nice to people. Generally, describe them the way they want to be described. I also think people get again, on both sides of this. I think when conservatives get way too bent out of shape over pronouns, it's kind of silly. I also think when pronoun people get way too bent out of shape about it, it's really obnoxious. Is this the first thing you need to tell me about yourself, honestly?
People were mad at Sam Smith, the singer, and how he wants to be a Fisher them.
Oh God.
And so people look, even leftists, even people who fully respect pronouns can wink and smile and say, okay, it's a funny word. I think even Sam Smith, he had a twinkle in his eye when he said it. He appreciates that it's a funny thing, a Fisher them, a fisherman.
Look at me,
he's non-binary.
More attention. I need more attention.
Right, we're all human beings here. We get, and I will say, I just interviewed on Monday on my podcast, Bad Faith, Aaron Reed, who we interviewed here as well, who has been following the hundreds of anti-trans bills that have come down the pike just this year alone, and has been doing a really good job of it. But I also asked her some tough questions about the parts of this that are harder, I think, for the left to defend, including specifically the first 30 minutes or so of the conversation was about trans women in sports and how to deal with the fundamental reality that sports are sex segregated, not gender segregated, but sex segregated because of differences between the sexes and the inability of, on the aggregate, women to compete with men, people who are assigned women at birth, female at birth, to compete with people who are assigned male at birth. And how can you ever, without completely undermining the idea of sex segregated sports, deal with the advantages that trans women have? And we talked about the Olympics efforts to get at these issues and, hormone level requirements and whether or not those meet the metrics and whether those are insufficient. And we had some good back and forth about that. So there are some hard issues here. I'm not going to deny that. I do think that, though, the kind of this manufactured idea, there's something manufactured about the idea that the average woman who identifies as a woman, who's a cis woman, is being constantly asked to identify as something else outside of perhaps some forms in a hospital somewhere that, yes, are intended to accommodate everybody, including people who might feel differently than you. And so occasionally you're going to have that inconvenience.
Including Fisher thems. Give them a fish. Okay. They'll eat for a day.
All right.
Teach them to fish. They'll eat for a lifetime.
When I find a medical treatment that is specific for Fisher them and that requires it to be on a form, then I will defend Fisher them on medical forms. Until then, let's leave it for the internet.
Okay, tomorrow on Rising, we'll be back, same time, same place, to bring you another fantastic show. And
yeah, you gotta like, share, and subscribe so that people see this content. You don't want to miss it, not a single second. And for those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, we are, of course, available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Tell your friends.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
I want to kind of keep in mind here that for a lot of people, regarding this whole situation, and the idea of sexual identity, gender identity, and all that type of stuff, you can kind of see already the problems that comes with really trying to defend women's rights when you can't even really identify a woman. Not only can you not identify a woman, you can also separate the idea of womanhood from her sex as a female. So then when it comes to actual discussions of women, where exactly do you go to really get at the core of what womanhood is supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like. There's still more. We still got a whole lot more that we're going to discuss. I told you all there's going to be quite a lot, and it's very and there's complexities involved in it, but we're going to go through as many of these things as possible because I really need you all to understand, especially when it comes to those that are a lot more liberal, those that are more their points and stuff. It becomes very challenging to really get at the heart of what is the point of gender and really sex, besides the fact that we are just used to just give life, right? Let me just mosey on down here. This is the one that was two of these. So I get to this one right here.
You just keep going all night. You can just keep doing that. No problem. Treated as women. 3, 2, 1. This is obviously very complicated. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. So strongly. You're certainly welcome to clap for everyone, sir. That's fantastic. I love that. I love that enthusiasm, and you're even welcome to clap even when nothing is happening. Okay, so you've got strongly disagree, you disagree, you agree. Okay, so let's start with you. So can you tell us what are the reasons for why you believe trans women should be legally treated as women?
Well, I disagree with that.
Oh, we disagree. Why you disagree?
Well, as we've seen in situations where jails are involved, right? So men and women ought to be separated in jails, regardless of how someone identifies.
Because why?
We don't want to see people get raped, as we've seen actually happen, right? Inmates have raped other inmates when a man has said he identifies as a woman and ends up raping another inmate who's a woman.
Okay.
That's a problem. And not to mention unfair competition in sports.
Is there a particular sport you're thinking about?
Well, swimming is an obvious one recently, but any sports competitions where physical strength and size matters, which is many sports, if not most.
Okay, so
I disagree that trans women ought to be treated the same as women, biological women, for those reasons.
Okay, so why? Well, yeah, but everything you said seems to me like you should be on strongly disagree.
So, but I don't strongly disagree insofar as like when it comes to interpersonal situations, if someone wants to be called by whatever pronouns they want.
But legally, the question is legally.
Legally. Even legally, like it's no, yeah, okay. No, fair enough. Why should I not step over?
And you can, so that's the thing. Anybody you can step it, no problem if you want to step. In fact, it's good.
Let me qualify that. So if someone fully transitions and wants to, have their driver's license say they're a woman when they were biologically male, it doesn't bother me,
So the reason
so that's a legal instance where, again, like to me, that's like not a.
So that's why you're on the disagree. Now, okay.
I can see cases where.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so why you? Sure, you know what? That's what you can do every time. Whenever anybody says anything, particularly me, just keep clapping. Okay, so why are you on the agree?
It's hard to say legally. I mean, I've worked in a hospital and they really put an emphasis on DEI, and that means using the exact pronouns and the genders that the patients associate themselves with. And this way they get the treatment that they seek out of a hospital or a medical institution. And so from that perspective, I see why it's valuable to make patients feel comfortable.
What if the treatment they seek isn't the treatment they need?
Could you provide an example?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of a friend of mine is a physician, and she had a patient come in who appeared as a male, and she thought she was a male, but she had a yeast infection. And there's a story in the news about a person who came in who was looked exactly like a male, self-identifies as male, fills out male, but the person was pregnant, and it never came up because they self-identified as male.
I think it's equally important to disclose medically what is happening, but it is up to the patients to refuse treatment, to decide that they don't want to go through with whatever the doctor is recommending.
No, for sure. The question is, should trans women legally be treated as women? Can you think of any examples where trans women should not legally be treated as women?
I've not thought about this.
And this is why you are here. That's when we need you.
I mean, I've talked about this with people in sports. I suppose I can see the validity of having an unequal or an unfair advantage because of biological, like at birth.
So you're buying the sports thing.
Validity in that.
Are you buying the prisons thing? That people who self-identify as women who have penises should not be in female prisons?
I think at the end of the day, it's their decision, and if they voluntarily choose to change genders in prison, then that is okay.
But what if they haven't had bottom surgery and are still intact and they self-describe as a woman? Should they be legally treated as a woman and put to a woman's prison?
Yes, I think so.
Are you concerned? Do you see any potential problems with that?
Yes, I do. But even so, even without this, there are currently lots of problems with the legal reform system. So
you just keep going all night. You can just keep doing that. No problem. So you got a huge fan over there.
I think he's a fan of everyone.
It's good. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm coming back to you because I'm still processing that.
Yeah.
Trans women should be legally treated as women. Tell me why you're strongly disagreeing.
Because I'm a molecular geneticist.
Well, I'm not even sure. Everybody else is clapping. Okay, so tell me what that, because I count on my fingers. I know nothing about genes.
Being male or being female is a developmental process. You can't go backwards.
Okay.
So you can't change your sex. Like, you cannot do that. And the truth is that currently in California prisons in other parts of the country, women are getting impregnated by other women. And there's just no way that, I mean, this is against the UN. After World War II, there was like I don't remember what body came up with this statute, but it was against, I believe it was the Hague. You cannot house female prisoners with male prisoners because they get raped. And that's happening today. And it's not in the news. It's not in the common news.
Okay.
But I know about it.
So that's the argument for, I just want to make sure I'm clear about this. So your argument is because you have domain-specific expertise as a molecular geneticist, and then the legal component of that is you're grounding that in your experience of what a man is and what a woman is.
Yeah. I'm sorry. This bothers me so much.
Well, that's why we're talking about it.
I know. My heart pounds, and I go to the women's changing room at my gym, and there's a dude in there. He's putting on makeup and hoop earrings. And this is not something a woman does when she goes to work out. And it's frightening.
Well, so I know nothing about what happens in women's rooms. So that's the behavior is not common in women's rooms?
No, nor do women beat each other to death, but men do. And it's so sad that women have internalized misogyny to the point where the man's comfort takes precedence over the woman's safety. There's a reason why they don't want to be in men's prisons, because men beat each other to death. Women don't do that.
Were you convinced by anything she said about putting men in women's prisons?
I have a rebuttal.
Please.
With all respect too, because I'm an aspiring molecular geneticist, I want to say that your argument is really geared towards men identifying as women. But what about the other way around? Women identifying as men.
So you're asking her if she, I want to make sure I got this right. So you're asking her if she has a problem with women going into men's prisons.
Yeah, or men's changing rooms, going to gyms.
Women cannot force a pregnancy on a man.
You buying that? You are? Okay. So what would it take you to move from agree to slightly agree? Like, what argument would you have to hear? What piece of evidence would you have to hear to move one line over?
I mean, I want to know specifically why legally it matters. I mean, I consider myself like pretty open-minded when it comes to these things, so I guess I would move over slightly agree. I just personally feel like in my heart that it doesn't matter legally who someone or what gender someone is.
Is it better to make that decision in your heart or in your head? Is it better to make that decision on the basis of the way you feel or on the basis of argument?
But I think having empathy for other people is also important.
And there are reasons to have empathy.
Yes.
And do the reasons to have empathy, because you can have empathy about the wrong things, right?
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that our reasons track our emotions in the right way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would it take you to move to the slightly agree?
A really good case study, a really good, solid.
That says what?
That says legally it's black and white, and
What's the it in that sentence? What?
are transgender women actually legally women, that it has to be one way or the other.
But that wouldn't be a case study. That would be an opinion piece.
Well, an example showing that that must be true, that transgender women have to be considered males.
But that would just be a legal opinion, though, as opposed to a case study. Oh, you mean like if you got a bunch of judges and lawyers who agreed?
I guess just, yeah, I suppose.
But couldn't they agree just because they've bought into a dominant cultural value as opposed to something that's true?
This might be offensive.
Impossible. You're talking to me.
How do you know that this, like the other side, isn't based on cultural norms and based on a legacy?
Oh, it is.
History of,
It totally is.
yeah.
But I would say the answer to that question is who's willing to revise their beliefs?
And I think it's a person-by-person basis.
On the basis of what? Reason, evidence, or emotion, or some combination thereof?
Some combination.
Okay, so you'd be willing to move to the slightly agree if you heard a case study of judges and lawyers. You'd be willing to move, but absent that, you're not going to move.
For now, yeah.
Okay. Anytime. Is anything anybody has said moved you to strongly disagree or to slightly disagree? Or are you still going to be on your line? It's 100% fine if you are, but
I'm pretty good here.
Are you confident that this is the right line?
Sure. I mean, like I said, there's these pretty clear cases where the distinction really matters. And then there's these other situations where I think most people, it doesn't hurt anybody.
Right. So that's okay. So that's why you're on the disagree.
Yeah.
What evidence would it take for you, just one piece, and I don't want to spend too much time on this question, but what evidence would it take for you to go to one step to the right or one step to the left? What would you have to know that you don't know now?
That someone would get hurt if someone's driver's license, for example, was changed. If there's evidence that there's harm would come of that, I would move to.
But you already gave, you already gave two examples, like Fallon Fox in MMA, or Leah Thomas in swimming.
Those are reasons why I'm happy to be here. Now, if changing your driver's license also caused harm, I would move to strongly disagree. So if there's
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
that makes
Okay,
sense,
okay. What would cause you? What, if anything, would cause you to move to the disagree? And is there anything you heard here tonight that would convince you to move one line over? It's okay to say no. I'm just trying to figure this out.
No, I have figured it out.
And you're confident.
I am as confident as I am that this is my hand in front of my face instead of yours. There is absolutely, this is the most insane thing that has ever happened to me in my life, that women are a feeling now. And that, as for the driver's license thing, if a man who has transitioned, has F on his driver's license, and then he gets arrested, they're going to put him in a cell with women. And his hands are stronger, his body is stronger, and he can beat that woman to death.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, that's
Wow. Wow. Now we need you. Wow. Wow. Hold on. You can come next. Wow.
So what you're saying is a good case for why we should maybe have a category that specifically says trans woman, not just female suddenly, right? So the designation is, this person is not male anymore. They don't, they've whatever lost their parts and have done hormones and transitioned as far as they could, but they're still not male fully, or they're still not a woman that are a trans woman. It's like a separate category.
Okay, so
and then so when it comes to sports, again,
so you move. You move. Okay, I'm gonna do another, but I want to go say that. So he was convinced enough from disagree to strongly disagree based upon her one example. Does her example, is that sufficient to decrease your confidence and agree? It's okay if it's not. I'm just trying to figure out.
So I actually have I feel like everyone hates me.
No, just I don't do. Hurry. No, nobody hates you.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We're just trying to figure out we're just trying to figure stuff out here.
So my counter argument to that is there's always this danger where men could beat up women, and even as a woman myself, I could easily be walking down the street and get, assaulted or attacked, right? And just because something changes and it's not what we're used to, you could easily see the negatives. For instance, women going to school at UC Berkeley, right? That wasn't always a thing. And in fact, in the physics building here, the women's bathroom isn't even adjacent to the classroom because previously they weren't allowed to go here. You could easily make an argument that when women started coming to school and getting higher education, that men wouldn't have been accepting of them and could have attacked them easily, but that shouldn't be a reason as to stop them from achieving higher education or.
Okay, all right. I'm going to give you last word. So you can come up next. Hold on. All right. We did the first question. Give him a round of applause.
Whew. That was a lot. But we're not done yet, y'all. We're not done. There's still more to this. There is still more. Let me see. Which one did I want to do? Where is It is the jab. Where is the here it is right here. Oh, wait, hold on, go back. I don't want to do that quite yet.
What is a woman?
A woman is
having a vagina. Oh well, actually no. Whatever you want to think.
Oh, wow.
Woman.
There's trans men who are now capable of giving birth.
Does questioning make you transphobic?
So this is the one right here.
This is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology is that no one is a woman.
Well,
can you tell me what a woman is?
No, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for everybody.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Well,
how
that's
do you define a
someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing, when you're female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies, we could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's ingrained in every fiber of their being.
Interesting. So I'm trying to understand. Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female, you said, right?
Correct. Is a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? Cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce. Maybe doesn't have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not myself.
You used the word. So what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right. So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
that describes what?
People who identify as a woman.
Identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently. And so trans women are women too.
Okay.
And you want to hold on. You want to reduce. Listen. You want to reduce.
So
you want to reduce women. You want to reduce men down to maybe just their genetics, our genitals, our chromosomes. Right. That's what you're saying.
What you want to do is
that's
what you want to do is appropriate women. You want to appropriate womanhood.
Okay.
And turn it into basically a costume that could be worn. We've got it's real funny. It's real funny. It's real funny when you're
should look like. Right. So man, you're literally saying this is what a woman is.
Yeah. Well,
isn't that a little sexist?
Because I am willing to define it, but you won't.
So there's more. we still got one. I got one more that I want to play for you guys, ladies and gentlemen. Of course.
Like, why are you this one T-Rex and then let's add that in and let's see how that kind of goes. And what happens is the T-Rex just destroys them.
So should trans athletes compete against biological women?
People think that they're going to beat them, then they're probably not the best for that competition.
That's like saying like there's like 10 bears that are all fighting each other. And then it's like, wait, let's bring in this one T-Rex and then let's add that in and let's see how that kind of goes. And what happens is the T-Rex just destroys them.
So trans people are T-Rexes?
I mean, you can say that.
Women's sports is pretty self-descriptive. Women compete against women.
No matter how many surgery, a woman's body is a woman's body. You can't really change that.
You get on hormone therapy, it does change the hormones within your bodies.
If they're classified as females, they should be able to compete against females. What do I actually think?
Yeah.
Women should compete against women, and transgenders should compete against transgenders.
Okay. Why do you believe that?
I got my own problems.
I was in the military. Was it fair for a male to do the female PT test?
The woman's PT, like a lower standard?
Significantly lower because a female can only do so much.
I do play men's volleyball, though, collegiately.
But before we continue, I know damn well I'm not the only one confused. I hope you don't mind me asking, but were you born a biological male?
I'm non-binary, so I can be female as a gender, and my sex can be male.
Whatever feels best for the day.
How about between Monday and Friday?
Monday and Friday, definitely she, her at my job. It just depends on the vibe.
Depends, yeah. On this channel, we explore the unfamiliar because it's only through genuine conversations that we can change our perspective. But will people be too afraid to speak their truth? And with all the controversy, will I be demonetized or even worse, canceled like Chappelle? Bro, chill. Ain't no one canceling you with your no subscriber head ass. I guess we gonna see. What is then?
Anyone who identifies as such. It's just somebody who feels comfortable within femininity.
I don't even want to say femininity because it goes beyond that.
I'm more of a logical person. Kind of actually take that weird Jordan Peterson type stuff, just believing in yourself, and actually affect that towards like gender.
Maybe let's take like a recent controversial issue like abortion. Heard women say, hey, no one should be making laws about us. In that instance, it seems like a woman is someone who is able to have a baby. Does that constitute a woman, or would you still stick with your definition?
A uterus wouldn't like make you a woman. I feel like there's so many other parts that are so much more important than just that.
Vagina considers a woman, but if you have like the long hair, if you have the nails.
So I think those are pretty big differences, right? Because I could put on nails and hair, but if I identified as a woman, would that make me a woman?
Yeah.
Is there any scientific definitions, or is it just the words become true?
No one decides to become a woman. So no one just wakes up and is like, oh, I feel like being a woman. There are tons of thoughts, decisions, and even social repercussions, like this entire line of questioning that come with coming out as a woman.
But wouldn't that be kind of ignoring some sort of biological, realities?
I think that everybody has their own biological reality, and that's how the world has always worked. But this world is changing every fucking day, and you just gotta keep up with the new time. Are you straight by chance?
I am, yeah.
You identify as straight, and you identify as a male?
Yeah.
So not everybody is going to follow what your path is, and some people have their own path. And sometimes we just weren't born with that knowledge because we didn't get taught that as children.
Why has it changed over the last few years?
There's trans men who are now capable of giving birth. Whatever makes someone feel better at night and doesn't hurt somebody else, I don't think should matter to anybody.
Okay. So then what will the other side say? Okay, in your mind, do you think there are more than two genders?
Yes. I couldn't identify them all for you. But
I'm an old school, so if I'm growing up, I just know man and woman.
Again, I think I decided that I'm an alien. Do you believe me? And if you don't accept that I'm an alien, then you're wrong. And that just doesn't make logical sense. So you can have your own opinion, your own thoughts, but I think there's one or the other.
Outside of sport, I don't really think it matters.
So obviously both sides have opinions, but do both sides have solutions? What do you think is the solution? Do you think trans athletes should have their own league? Do you think that sports should be gender neutral?
I've seen some females out there that can kick any guy's ass. I mean, look at fucking Ronda Rousey. She could probably take all her asses up at once.
I don't doubt that at all, but do you think she'll be able to take a professional male UFC fighter?
I mean, look at her. That bitch is vicious. You know what I mean?
Honestly, I feel like you could beat my ass with those, honestly.
Baby, I'll give somebody a black eye with these.
Some women probably think that they're like faster than men, and some men probably think that they do like way better in like a female, or I'm trying to think of one that typically females are in. Ooh, cheerleading.
Yeah, I think that's the only way you could do it without pissing people off.
Should our priority be to not piss people off?
Yeah, that is tricky. I guess you have to choose who you want to piss off, because then you create more division, right? You say, oh, well, we're going to make this only. But then it does make it inclusive for them if that's what they want to do.
Will there even be enough to form a league?
Not necessarily, but I think if we're going to talk about integration, color being integrated into our schools, parks, society wasn't normalized until we talked about it. So trans is one of those topics right now that we just have to normalize.
not going to work 2 or 3 times as hard to try to compete against someone naturally born as a male.
Which does bring up something that no one wants to talk about. Are trans women taking away women's rights? Because it wasn't until 50 years ago when Title IX granted more equal access to women in sports. But today, when a trans woman receives a roster spot, is it denying biological women's opportunities? And if there are biological advantages, more times than not, is it denying opportunities to win?
I think you have to ask that population.
If only I knew someone who was trans and also an athlete.
I think someone who is prepubescent and is on hormones before developing natural testosterone, they're not as strong as me.
So should there be an age cutoff then?
Yes, their estrogen and testosterone levels have to be tested before competing.
If I'm gonna be real, I didn't expect that answer. And that even with hormone therapy, when you transition matters. So let's explore further on these advantages. Do you think that trans women have any sort of advantage against biological women when it comes to sports?
No, people can train and become whatever that they want to do, and you have the same ability to do that. Some people grow muscle faster than others, and that has nothing to do with your genitals.
In general, do you think men and women have physical differences?
I think there are physical differences across the plane. We have differences. We're both women. We have differences. We're both women.
Yeah.
There could be biological advantages to it, but at what point is like that measure quantifiable?
A basketball player is scoring 500 points a game.
I would say that would go into more of the skill than rather than just like hormonal like influence.
As long as they're on like the proper treatment like HRT, I actually think at that point it becomes a disadvantage. I am also on estrogen. Like I lost a lot of that muscle, gained a lot of fatigue.
When I used to play soccer, and I felt like it was like better. I felt like I could challenge myself more.
It said that it made you better. Are you saying that men have an advantage over women when it comes to sports?
No, I don't think so. There's like ways in which that men and women can learn from each other in sports.
I guess, but could that be considered a bit unfair for biological women?
I don't think so.
Do you know who LeBron James is? Yeah. So he's 6'8", 280 pounds. What if he became a trans woman and competed against WNBA players? Would that be something that the WNBA players should just get over?
Like she would have an advantage. At the same time, I don't know. I feel like they could figure it out.
He probably would be in a league with similarly stacked women. There are 6-foot+ women who weigh a lot, who have a lot of musculature, and probably they'd be playing in the same league.
I think it would just depend on the sport.
I guess what would be a sport where it would be an equal playing field?
I haven't really thought too much about it.
I think in swimming it's possible because they're likely to be more muscular.
And that's actually happened. Leah Thomas was a swimmer at UPenn who started her collegiate career competing on the men's swim team. But during Leah's junior year, she started hormone therapy and
transitioned to be happy.
Previously, Leah was ranked 65th in the men's 500-yard freestyle, but as a woman,
Leah Thomas pulling away over the final 150 meters, wins the NCAA championship.
She ranked first after winning the national championship. It's controversial to even question this, but sports is competition. So to avoid falling behind, will more programs start exclusively recruiting trans athletes?
Complete what I signed up for.
It's something the World Swimming Organization has noticed. New rules will now only allow athletes who have transitioned before the age of 12 to compete in women's events. So the more controversial topic, the more discussions we need.
Like I'm a big soccer fan. So women's soccer and men's soccer becoming competitive to the point where like some of them are like passing the same like records at the same time.
I have to disagree. Because I have personal experiences with this. When I was like on a U16 soccer team, we played the Portland Thorns. So they were like the women's champions of that specific year. So they have like Alex Morgan, like a bunch of like these Olympic high level athletes. We killed them 6-1 and we were 15.
A personal experience like that only goes so far. You can have outliers because we're seeing individual women break like certain records and all that.
Against other women.
It is against other women, but we are also seeing those numbers match very closely to male numbers.
But don't you think numbers are always relative, right? Like, let's say if I joined a 8-year-old league, I'm going to score 1,000 goals, right?
No, but numbers as far as like stuff like goals or like...
Yeah, I guess like what I'm arguing that it is relative though, right? Because you're comparing a woman who is playing against other women's, that record against a man playing against other men, right?
Yeah, exactly. With those numbers becoming closer, that is also a good sign that going to move that like the bell curve and closer together.
In sports that doesn't require as much physical rigor, do you think then trans women should be able to compete against biological women?
But people wonder why WNBA and NBA get paid differently. It's because clearly NBA guys are dunking like crazy. But hey, if a girl is at that level, then sure, like go do it.
How about like maybe like something even more consequential like UFC or MMA? Do you think men and women should be fighting against each other?
So I would think the weight classes could account for that.
What if the biological women think it's unfair, but they still have to compete? What about those instances?
I know I would never be trying to fist fight a man.
Why is that?
My opinion doesn't really matter because I'll never be like involved in that stuff. Sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize.
If I'm a female and I'm training my ass off every fucking day, there's a guy who doesn't have to train as hard as me. He comes in and he beats me. I don't feel like shit. No.
And if anyone's allowed to voice an opinion, shouldn't it be those in competition? But instead, what we're seeing is severe consequences for speaking out.
Because at a certain point, I felt like I had to do something.
Taylor Silverman is a Jewish skater who placed second in 2 different contests to trans women. So fed up, she posted a screenshot of her email to Red Bull, who hosted the contest.
And I knew that people would come after me. I knew that people would come after me for being Jewish.
And what followed was a viral post with tons of comments calling her a transphobe and even some anti-Semitic hate.
The people who are responsible are the contest organizers who allow it to happen, because the reality is all the athletes competing are just going by the rules. Obviously, emailing Red Bull wasn't a way to start a conversation about it. They did not want to have that conversation at all.
And it's exactly this censorship of discussion that's completely hypocritical to the toted message of tolerance and acceptance. And so it's time to explore further, because we've heard of trans women competing, but why not the reverse? Why do we never hear instances of trans men competing against biological men, but we've heard a lot of instances of trans women competing against biological women?
I am aware of trans professional male athletes who are successful.
But I haven't heard any in the NBA or soccer.
We tend to focus on things that are mainstream.
We just don't necessarily get that in the news as often.
But we've been hearing news about trans women competing against
Yeah, because
Biological
that's how the news is. Like, and that's how like this is. It operates on clicks.
Do you think there are instances?
Like, why are you asking these questions right now type thing?
I'm trying to get closer to what the answer might be. That's why I'm going this approach, asking questions what the other side may ask you.
It's a slightly different approach, and it's like nice.
And it's because of misogyny.
This is an instance of a biological woman turning into a man competing against men.
Yeah.
Why would there be misogyny involved then?
Because misogyny, because they don't see they're not seeing them as men. Basically, they're not taking them serious.
So then why do we not see the reverse? Do you think it's just one-sided misogyny, or
I literally think it's that. It's
if there's no physiological differences between men and women when it comes to sports? Why haven't we heard any instances of that?
Society seems to deem women's sports as needing some sort of assistance. So when they see a trans person competing, they feel as though there's something encroaching on a sport that's already not competing on the same level as men's sports, which is inaccurate. Women's sports are highly competitive, often can compete with men at the same level and win.
What sports?
Like a woman playing against a man tennis player, you can see it being fairly competitive.
And in 1998, Serena and Venus Williams did exactly that. Or tried to. They challenged any professional male player to a match as long as they were outside of the top 200. The challenge was accepted by Karsten Brosch, who was ranked 203rd in the world. And the match was a close one. He beat Serena 6-1, 6-2.
It's a completely different sport. The men are a lot faster. I love to play women's tennis, and I only want to play girls because I don't want to be embarrassed.
So now it's time to ask the most important question. It is a question that I kept asking myself throughout this video. Does questioning make you transphobic?
No, I'm just talking my honest truth. I would be lying to myself if I say anything else.
I think questioning is fine because it allows to explore the curiosity and become much more understanding. I think once you make a judgment towards it, that's when like the phobia comes in.
Well, I know I'm phobic. I'm homophobic. I'm transphobic. If it ain't female, don't come at me with that crazy shit.
When it comes to sports, got to be black and white and universal. I'm sure a lot of people won't agree with that.
Do you think we're prioritizing too much of not pissing people off?
That has changed a lot of the ways that people are accepted or desire to be accepted. My whole life, when I see something, this is what my brain tells me. For me to just say, oh, that's this, and not understand it, that is me disagreeing with myself. And that causes more conflict within. That's also another line that we have to really be wary of.
Things have changed considerably. Women didn't look like that when I was...
Now more than ever, we need to learn to disagree. But when questioning the current thing means you're whatever phobic, how can we even have these types of conversations? Where are you from, by the way?
Well, there's a lot of controversies around it in Jamaica, but the world is evolving. Probably my opinion might be not someone else's opinion.
And even though I was afraid to make this, what I realized is that if you approach with curiosity, people will speak their truth. And just how people should have the right to do whatever they want with their body. Have you always felt this way? Is this always something that you wanted to do?
Since like childhood, and I wanted to be viewed for myself versus like a gender.
People should also have the right to speak out for their beliefs. Because if there's one guarantee in the world, it's change.
Like the stuff we viewed 200 years ago isn't viewed the same way now. Maintaining a focus of this gradual progression is a good thing.
Navigating change means dealing with the controversies. And it all starts by exploring the unfamiliar.
Is this going to be broadcasted?
Yes, it'll be on YouTube.
All right. So that's what I wanted to share with that. So I do some as a recurring theme. Hold on, let me see this. Let me get myself back onto the screen real quickly. Guys, take your light break while you're doing that. So L Boogie says, isn't it obvious that it's an agenda on the erasure of womanhood? Trans female to male, no, they could never be men. Many of them still get their cycle. She also says that T people shouldn't be able to legally change their gender on their birth certificates and license, because what's the reason? To deceive? We're going to legally make sure they can't deceive others. Yeah. So I mean that's just so a lot going on. All right. But you saw that one of the common themes that was discussed while talking about this topic of women and female was that, you know, sex and gender are not it's not really intersect. In other words, that you can be born with a particular sex, but then eventually you can move on to gender, which then has you wondering about, again, women's rights. And what exactly is being fought for when it comes to dealing with women? So as you all know, one of those topics that that kind of leads to that level of controversy is due to the ideas of abortion, right? And how women's rights is often tied to the ideas of abortion, right? But if you really take time to think about it, if there's no definition of woman and all you really have is the female essence that you're really working with, how then are you going to be able to really handle the effects of womanhood by nothing other, especially for biological women, by nothing other than reproduction? Because when you're biologically a woman, you have a womb, right? That's pretty much, it's really hard to have a distinct right for something that's for biologically women, unless it's involving something of sex, of course, right? Particularly when it comes to reproduction. And it's been one of those controversial things that have been happening long before even just the transgender movement, but it also adds into another layer. It's why you've been seeing discussions about being a birthing person or a person who menstruates and stuff like that, particularly when we talked about the whole Anna discussion. All this limits women, biological women, to be seen through their uterus and what they are able to provide through the womb, the whole birthing person thing and whatnot. So that's what we're going to be going into a little bit, going to a little bit more. By the way, if you are enjoying the content, as I said before, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. And as I get myself set up for this next, so let's see. Oh man, it's quite a bit here. Let's see. Well, I guess we can. Okay, let's see. Wow. Hold on, guys, because there's a lot here to really there's a lot to work with here. We can start with this one right here. Let me get myself back onto the screen. All right. Well, get the screen up, I should say. All right. So let's start with this one right here.
Extra vitamins and nutrients.
Black history of racism. America is the only country where the number of birthing people who die or almost die related to pregnancy and childbirth is rising.
We are really failing our women and lives of birthing people. Black birthing people.
Black birthing people.
Chest feeders.
Birthing people.
Birthing people.
Birthing people.
Birthing people. Birthing people.
So there's our start. And you see a whole lot of them are women, right? It's women calling each other birthing people. Let's see.
Daisy, a woman, Sal Grover, she's been on Sky News, said she was horrified after giving birth to be asked to sign a form putting a baby on a Medicare card where she had to tick a box calling herself a birthing parent, not a mother. And now Government Services Minister Bill Shorten said, well, look, as soon as he heard about this, he ordered officials to scrap this form and replace it with new ones using the word mother, not birthing parent. Now, what is the strangest thing to me about this story, I don't know whether you agree, is that is it a form asking mothers to call themselves birthing parents, or is it in fact that this form is part of a trial that started under the Liberal government, the previous Liberal government?
Oh gosh, well, really, not a lot of that is strange, Andrew. I mean, we are living at a time where a niche group of activists who have a disproportionate amount of cultural and institutional power are lobbying to sort of normalize radical gender theory. And as for the Liberal Party putting in this kind of program, well, they've been trying to out-left the left really since Malcolm Turnbull came into the leadership. So of course, this is a type of program that they would inaugurate. And as for Bill Shorten, being unwoke proverbially, well, look, maybe he's using it as a chance to make him look like the sensible for once. I mean, who knows, but it really is quite amusing. The thing about this, Andrew, is that it shows a real ignorance of the English language. I mean, take the word mother, for instance. That's actually synonymous with birthing a person who gives birth, because mother is not just a noun, it's also a verb. And if you look up mother in verb form, it means, amongst other things, quite literally, to give birth. It's quite explicit. And this is even observed in law in some cases. If you look at the Births, Deaths and Marriages Registration Acts, for instance, in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, the word mother is used repeatedly in conjunction and is inextricably linked to the person who gives birth. In Queensland, for instance, it's really explicit. They define birth as the expulsion or extraction of a child from its mother, not birthing parent, mother. It is all there implied in the word mother. So if there are any activists out there who think that the word birthing person, that term is like a necessary substitute for mother in order to be woke or inclusive or whatever, I suggest they consult a dictionary.
As we go into Mother's Day weekend, let us recommit our efforts and support to ensure that every birthing person across this nation is empowered and feels safe.
We have not created an infrastructure to support birthing people.
All pregnant and birthing people deserve to be treated with love. Birthing while Black should not be a death sentence.
Health equity for Black birthing people is attainable.
Mothers and babies and Black birthing people are important.
We desperately need long-term fixes to support the healthcare needs of Black women and birthing people.
The most marginalized Black and Indigenous birthing people.
To systemically shift the way we approach healthcare for birthing people of color.
And respectful of Black women and birthing people.
The maternal mortality crisis among Black birthing people in the United States.
Black birthing people and birthing people.
For birthing people.
Black birthing people.
And our Black birthing persons.
For all birthing persons in Louisiana.
That birthing people want doulas and midwives.
In support for birthing people during the postpartum period.
There are not enough Black workers of color, leaving Black birthing people with limited autonomy or opportunity to receive racially concordant care.
Protect Black birthing people and to save lives.
They're really showing themselves to do really well. Come on, man.
All right.
To protect Black birthing people.
Continue to fail Black birthing people.
Enhance coverage and support for birthing people.
Birthing people. If this makes any sense to you, it's because you're a moron. So they finally came out with this yesterday, just in time for Mother's Day. So moms everywhere, you should feel really flattered. You may not be a woman. You're just a birthing person. And the same people who wear Handmaid's Tales outfits to protest Republican abortion policy because they say Republicans keep reducing us to our reproductive organs. They keep reducing us down to our reproductive abilities. Call women birthing persons now. That's what they call them. And it wasn't just one congressperson. This is going to be the term within the next several months. You are going to see Democrats adopting this term in widespread fashion. So Cori Bush, the adjunct member of the squad, she just joined from Missouri. She's a former Black Lives Matter activist. I mean, she's actually still a Black Lives Matter activist. She's just in Congress. Now, she's talking about how birthing persons are dying. Now, to you, the normal human being, who, like all humans, like all Homo sapiens for the last 300,000 years or so, have understood that birthing persons are female, you may say to yourself, why are we now conveying less information? Why are we trying to obscure information that is clearly obvious? Why don't you say moms? Instead, you, a mother, are now a birthing person, according to Cori Bush.
Every day, Black women are subjected to harsh and racist treatment during pregnancy and childbirth. Every day, Black women die because the system denies our humanity. It denies us patient care. I sit before you today as a single mom, as a nurse, as an activist, and as a congresswoman, and I am committed to doing the absolute most to protect Black mothers, to protect Black babies, to protect Black birthing people, and to save lives.
Okay, Black birthing people. Okay, then she tweeted out, every day, Black birthing people and our babies die. So she used mothers there like 10 times and women. So she fully understands that birthing people are mothers and are women. Right? She totally gets it. But instead, what she tweets is, every day, Black birthing people and our babies die. And this is the new term, right? The new term is birthing people. Now, again, I can't think of much more degrading to a woman than to suggest, number one, that the process of pregnancy and childbearing has nothing to do with being a woman, and simultaneously to suggest that you can be boiled down to just bearing babies. Like, it is the exact opposite of what feminism suggested. Feminism suggested that women are different than men, and women ought to be respected for that and treated equally, despite that difference. And in fact, because of that difference, right? Feminism suggested there's something special about being a woman. The new feminism is there's nothing special about being a woman, and in fact, men can give birth, right? All of which is just ridiculous. Now, I've watched my wife give birth 3 times. It turns out it's a very female thing. It's a pretty amazing thing. It's a superpower that women hold. And to degrade down to nothing is really incredible. I mean, we've been told by the feminist left of today that the highest achievement that a woman can have is to never have kids, apparently, and to just spend your time working 2,200 hours at a law firm so you can have a partner title, the same as a man, and delay childbearing, delay child rearing, delay marriage. This is the best move that you can make. If you finally do have a baby, you should probably freeze your eggs and then do it much later so you can have your career development. You don't need a man to do any of this sort of stuff. Now, the amazing thing about this is that the people who then end up getting married and having kids are the people who promote this same ideology. And the members of the new ruling class is the point that Charles Murray makes in Coming Apart. The people who are higher on the economic totem pole, those folks tend to get married and have kids. It's just all the stuff they preach filters into the culture, and it undermines marriage, and it undermines childbearing under healthy circumstances, and it's really stupid. Okay, but this is something that the left has been pushing for a long time, and now it's come to its culmination in de-sexing having children. Right now, it is a sexless thing to have children, which is an amazing, amazing thing. Okay, and again, it was not just Cori Bush. Representative Carolyn Maloney from New York, she says the same thing. America's health system is failing Black birthing people.
How does one of the most medically advanced nations in the world continue to fail Black birthing people at such high rates? To understand, we have to take the blinders off our history and acknowledge that our healthcare system, including reproductive health care, was built on a legacy of systemic racism.
Okay, in a second, I'm going to talk about the systemic racism point, but the fact that you just keep saying Black birthing, you mean Black women? Why are you being so disrespectful to women? I, honest to God, don't understand how women could look at this stuff and not feel insulted. It's ridiculous. It's just, it's beyond crazy, but we're all supposed to believe it, right? And if you notice this, they get mad. If you notice, it's like, why are you even noticing this? I'm noticing it because you guys are radically redefining biology. You're radically redefining reality in front of me, and I'm supposed to just be there like, who cares? Representative Robin Kelly from Illinois, she says the exact same thing during the same hearing. So obviously the memo went around. It's no longer Black women. It is Black birthing people.
The federal government should support access to and the provision of patient-centered, data-driven, quality maternal care, enhance coverage and support for birthing people during the postpartum period, and address social determinants of health, including structural...
They're all looking at their notes, by the way. You can stop it there. The fact that they keep using the term birthing people, the memo went around. Don't offend people of the left who have to virtue signal about the idea that men could be women. So just to get this straight, according to the left, here's how human biology works. You ready for this? According to the left, birthing people gestate meaningless clusters of cells. And then those clusters of cells exit the birthing people. And they are assigned sex at birth. They don't have a sex. They're assigned it by a doctor. The doctor just looks at them and randomly, and then just assigns sex at birth. And then later, they decide their own sex. If this makes any sense to you, it's because you're a moron. Honest to God, if this makes any sense to you, it's because you've been so well educated in the new woke vocabulary at major American universities that you've lost your mind. It is denial of fundamental human reality. It is denial of biology. And it does have consequences. The consequences, some of them are smaller and some of them are larger. How's this for a title? Ben Shapiro Show subscriber destroys.
All right. So there is that whole birthing person thing. So I wanted to do this. I wanted to bring it all up so it can lead to everything that we have been talking about when it comes to reproductive rights, particularly as we've been hearing about this through the election. Let me get this set up really quickly.
Year since the Supreme Court ended the federal right to abortion in the United States. To note that anniversary, congressional Democrats are gearing up to take several steps toward enshrining reproductive rights into law. According to Axios, House Democrats are currently working to force a floor vote on the Women's Health Protection Act. If passed, the bill would codify at the federal level the right to an abortion before viability. Democrats will need 6 Republicans to bring the matter up for a vote. Now, Democrats in the Senate are expected to push for votes on 4 pieces of legislation that would codify the right to contraception into law, allow people to travel across state lines to get abortions, and protect doctors who perform abortions for patients from outside their own states. As of right now, neither measure is expected to pass. But as NBC News is reporting, Democrats are hoping to have the Republicans' views on reproductive rights on the record ahead of next year's elections. Joining us now, congressional reporter for the New Republic, Grace Seegers. Grace, great to see you this morning. I mean, the issue of abortion obviously was a defining one in the 2022 midterms. It looms large right now with this anniversary on the horizon on the weekend. So walk us through just both parties' political approach to what is clearly still going to be a hot button issue next year.
Exactly. So we saw that abortion was very critical in 2022. It was particularly a motivating factor for women. So we know that Democrats are hoping to capitalize once again on that momentum, hoping to reach out to women voters in particular to say, hey, we're trying to do something in Congress, even if that something is getting blocked by Republicans. But they and Democrat candidates are going to continue to press forward with this. Don't expect this issue to go away before the 2024 elections. But Republicans are taking kind of a different route, particularly in Congress. They don't really want this to be talked about too much. They have been avoiding the issue beyond just general platitudes about believing in anti-abortion or opposing abortion rights. So I think that for Democrats, they're very excited to capitalize on this issue going forward. Republicans would rather downplay it. It'll be really interesting to see whether they try to press forward on the issue in terms of trying to pass federal restrictions or just keep their head down, which is what they've been doing so far.
People were very concerned about the issue of abortion rights. And Democrats, as you pointed out, had several victories last night in this off election year, especially here in Ohio when it comes to women's reproductive rights. Women strongly backed this measure overall. But what's very interesting, too, is when you break out both men and women under the age of 30, 80% of them also voted yes on this issue, according to a CBS News exit poll. People were very concerned about the issue of abortion.
Republicans made abortion illegal in half the country, which is horrible. It should be a winning issue for Democrats, but here's how Democrats talk about it.
This Friday, June 7th, will be 49 years since there was a decision made in the Roe versus Wade question.
Bruh, why is this sentence taking you 49 years to say?
I just didn't mean to stumble onto that one. So let's see. Let's go to this one here.
When you're expecting a baby, packing for the hospital should be a joyful moment. For us, it was different. We were told with 100% certainty we would lose our baby girl, Willow, and we were sent home. For 3 days, we waited until Amanda was sick enough to receive standard abortion care. Eventually, Amanda's temperature spiked. She was shaking, disoriented, and crashing. I don't remember what I threw into our bag that day, only that instead of welcoming Willow, I was hoping Amanda's life could be saved. I'm here tonight because the fight for reproductive rights isn't just a woman's fight. This is about fighting. This is about fighting for our families. And as Kamala Harris says, our future.
Every time I share our story, my heart breaks. For the baby girl we wanted desperately, for the doctors and nurses who couldn't help me deliver her safely, for Josh, who feared he would lose me too. But I was lucky. I lived. So I'll continue sharing our story. Today, because of Donald Trump, more than 1 in 3 women of reproductive age in America lives under an abortion ban. A second Trump term would rip away even more of our rights. Passing a national abortion ban, letting states monitor pregnancies and prosecute doctors, restricting birth control and fertility treatments. We cannot let that happen. We need to vote as if lives depend on it, because they do.
Two years ago, my husband and I were expecting our second child. Our daughter, Lauren, couldn't wait to be a big sister. I was getting ready for her 4th birthday party when something didn't feel right. 2 emergency rooms sent me away. Because of Louisiana's abortion ban, no one would confirm that I was miscarrying. I was in pain, bleeding so much my husband feared for my life. No woman should experience what I endured, but too many have. They write to me saying, "What happened to you happened to me." Sometimes they're miscarrying, scared to tell anyone, even their doctors. Our daughters deserve better. America deserves better. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will fight for reproductive rights and our freedom and our shared future. Growing up, I was an all-American girl. Varsity soccer captain, cheerleading captain, homecoming queen, and Survivor. I was raped by my stepfather after years of sexual abuse. At age 12, I took my first pregnancy test, and it was positive. That was the first time I was ever told, you have options. I can't imagine not having a choice. But today, that's the reality for many women and girls across the country because of Donald Trump's abortion bans. He calls it a beautiful thing. What is so beautiful about a child having to carry her parents' child? There are other survivors out there who have no options. And I want you to know that we see you. We hear you. Kamala Harris will sign a national law to restore the right to an abortion. She will fight for every woman and every girl, even those who are not fighting for her.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.
Let's see here. Kamala.
Women's rights, if the court overturns Roe v. Wade, it will be a direct assault on freedom, on the fundamental right of self-determination to which all Americans are entitled. There is nothing hypothetical about this moment. Those Republican leaders who are trying to weaponize the use of the law against women, well, we say, how dare they? How dare they tell a woman what she can do and cannot do with her own body? How dare they try to stop her from determining her own future? How dare they try to deny women their rights and their freedoms? We are not going back. If you stand for freedom, for self-determination, for the right to privacy, if you stand for these principles, stand with us. Let us fight for our country and for the principles upon which it was founded, and let us fight with everything we have got. God bless you and God bless America.
And so I longer than I ever anticipated to. But I conclude all of that by asking this question. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen to see me. There we go. All right. So I have all that. I share all of that to say, yes, when it comes to the abortion, there is a whole argument that is for abortion and things like that. And, for protecting women's rights when it comes to reproductive health. However, when you talk about women's rights and things like that, is that specifically going to the idea of adult human female as it is defined? Or is this related to the idea of ignoring the other side of misogyny that is happening on the Democratic side where you are including these transgender people who are able to determine whatever they want to be and being able to share their experience of being women through the gender, with the gender fluidity stuff? Is it only misogyny when it comes from the standpoint of reproductive health, when women is only limited to their female sexual nature? Or is it going to include all of that? I have not seen really anything, regarding the whole election. And I don't know if people have forgotten about it or if this is not a concern anymore, but the whole thing about women being specifically for a female, or the idea of having protections for women under the sake of identity beyond just simply sex and the reproduction, and towards whether or not they have an abortion or they're able to give birth, or whatever the case may be. I have not really heard anything about it, especially from Kamala, given the whole situation that has occurred with the expansion of Title IX and everything else to include other people who are not just simply women. So the question is there, are we really going to have a conversation about women's rights? Or is this going to be something that is further ignored? And as things continue on with women's rights and continuing on with the idea of 2030, particularly here in the United States, is this something that's going to expand even more to where the people who actually may need the protection as a woman don't really get it? Is it creating an extra layer for women, especially for those who may be at the bottom, like let's say Black women or women of color, to that effect, right? These are things I really want you all to take the time to think about. I know I haven't really talked about the actual 2030. However, I wanted to focus it from the standpoint of what is 2030 if particularly Kamala Harris gets in office and Democrats continue to gain seats in the White House. What is that going to mean for women's rights, not just simply for the standpoint of abortion, but for the sake of identity as well? How will it advance further as we go into more things regarding the future of the United States? All this talk about we're not going back, we're going forward. Okay, fine. Does that also include having a specific definition of womanhood? Because as Ketanji Brown said, she has no idea what that is. And according to other people who are being women despite being male at birth, women is a feeling. Women is simply something that you can choose to be, that you can assign yourself, that can be assigned to you. Has there ever been any significant pushback, with Kamala Harris as to what she is defining what a woman is? And I'm not simply saying it from the standpoint of her just simply being the Democratic nominee. I'm saying it because she is a representative of the Democratic Party. And we are, again, keeping in mind that there is some misogyny efforts that is being involved, or the ignorance involved with abortion that's on the right and with the side of the Republicans and things like that. That's true. But we cannot ignore the other side as well. And if you're going to talk about women's rights, you have to talk about the entire thing. And that's everything that I wanted to show you on today. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope this was informative. I hope this was helping you to get an understanding of what I'm coming from. Like I said, I'm not a woman, so I can't really give the full detail of everything that I want to share. I just wanted to give a perspective that is often ignored, because many times we're often focused on just simply the abortion rights. But that is also trying to identify yourself through just the sex part, which apparently, from what I see, the Democrats have no problem with. It is actually claiming your autonomy in the fullness of womanhood that seems to be a serious issue among Democrats and liberals. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope you were able to enjoy that. Click the like button if you were able to enjoy this particular content. It's longer than my usual one. I've never gone this long, 3 hours. Wow. But thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like button. If you're new here, click the subscribe button so that way you are alerted every time there is new content on this channel. And until we meet again, thank you, L Boogie. I really appreciate you. Thank you for sticking around. I hope this was insightful and able to give you something to think about. Everyone, I wish you all a wonderful day, especially if you're looking at this through the replay. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.